In this story, the Earth suddenly entered the era of spiritual revival. People focused on researching spiritual energy, and some were able to awaken superhuman abilities that they used to protect others from monsters as heroes. Somewhere else, our MC, Shinji, is stabbed in the stomach, and he demands to know what's happening from a lady named Rin. She gets tired of his blabbing and sticks the knife deeper so he can die. Suddenly, some other guy named Yuto asks the lady if the game is over, and she excitedly tells him she's been waiting for him. Yuto tells Shinji that he killed his comrades too, and asks him if he has any last words. Shinji calls him scum and swears never to forgive him, but Yuto doesn't give a crap. Yuto kicks him off a ledge to where some monsters can devour him, and Shinji blames himself for getting his party members killed. He promises to never forgive Rin and Yuto if he gets reincarnated, and he promises to bury them both while he becomes monster food. Suddenly, a system called the Supreme Martial Arts System is activated because this guy is in danger and time reverses. Because he doesn't have sufficient points, the system says the rewind point will be selected at random. In a few seconds, Shinji is shocked to find himself watching a football match, and he wonders how he's not dead. Out of nowhere, a screen pops up to inform him that his data has been loaded and he can select the attribute he wishes to have. He wonders if he came back to life, and when he realizes that's the case, he promises not to let those guys do as they want. From his calculation, Shinji realizes he's been sent back a month before the spiritual energy explosion. At this point, no one in the world has noticed the fact that the spiritual energy has begun recovering. After it recovers, humans and plants will undergo mutation. Anyone who eats supreme-grade energy fruit can gain superhuman power. This occurrence even affects the weather and causes several changes in the sky. Shinji hopes to be able to grow his strength by harnessing power from the charged environment. He smugly decides that 1 month is enough time to become stronger. He decides to check out the system, and the system informs him that it has 4 main features, which include attribute development, point exchange, attribute skill addition, and daily missions. Shinji decides to choose the fire attribute since it has the high attack power, and the system informs him that he's gained the purple fire attribute skill called Heavenly Fiery Crystal. Because of the purple skill, he's also given 5 points. Shinji is shocked because of how rare the purple crystal is since it's the highest tier skill. Once he grabs the crystal, he is overwhelmed with the power of fire, and he promises himself to be stronger than anyone else. Suddenly, he gets a call from Tamura Rin, who tells him that she needs 200k yen from him to add to the cost of a bag she wants to get. Annoyed, Shinji asks her if she's stupid and tells her to go ask Yuto and to never call him again. In the car, Rin is surprised by his reaction, and she demands to know how he can dare talk to her like that. Yuto wonders what's going on, but Rin says that Yuto is the only person she cares about, and she doesn't care about him. Later, Shinji heads out under the scorching sun, and he wishes he had reincarnated a few days ago so he could find the hospital where the person he's looking for is. He's checked 3 hospitals. In a flashback, he remembers talking to this person who's named Mika, and he remembers how she told him that her father made her eat suspicious health food that caused her internal ice spiritual energy core to shatter. In the present, Shinji promises to protect Mika and her spiritual energy. Somewhere else, the doctors wonder what's wrong with Mika because her vitals are normal, but her body temperature won't rise. Her father begs a doctor named Lee to save her, so Lee checks her pulse and asks Mr. Matsumoto if his daughter has traveled recently. Matsumoto replies that she went to Iceland the month before to celebrate her university acceptance, and this happened a week after she returned. The doctor says her body has accumulated too much yin energy, and they must use yang to dispel it. He prescribes a medicine for her, and he advises that she takes it well so she doesn't get worse. As the doctor leaves, Shinji rushes into the room, and they all wonder who on earth he is. When they realize he doesn't work in the hospital, they try to take him out because no unauthorized personnel are allowed into this section. However, Shinji tells Mr. Matsumoto that his daughter isn't sick but has awakened an extremely rare ice-type spiritual energy. He warns that her body will break down and her future will be ruined if he interferes, but the doctors force him out because they're sure he's been watching too much manga recap. Suddenly, Dr. Lee stops them and asks Shinji how he knows about ice-type spiritual energy and who he is. Shinji replies that it doesn't matter who he is and suggests that what matters is waking her up. Dr. Lee asks him if he has a solution, so Shinji suggests a specific measurement of ginger, aconite, cinnamon bark, and codonopsis. Everyone is shocked because that's the same prescription the doctor just gave, and they wonder how he knows about Eastern medicine and if he eavesdropped. Lee tells him that his prescription is the same thing he gave, but Shinji points out that one thing is still missing, which is Stardew flower. Dr. Lee agrees that this prescription would actually wake her up, but there's nowhere to find Stardew flower anywhere in the world. Meanwhile, the others are shocked that Shinji's suggestion actually makes sense. Nearby, Mr. Matsumoto asks the doctor how much this Stardew flower could cost, and he says he can prepare any amount of money. The doctor tells him there's nowhere to buy it. Apparently, a stardew flower is shaped like a star, which is how it got its name. The extract from the flower holds great healing power, but Lee says he's only seen it recorded in ancient texts, and it only existed when spiritual energy was abundant on Earth. Matsumoto becomes afraid that this means his daughter will remain like this forever, but Shinji promises him that he will save Mika without leaving a single scar. Dr. Lee asks him if he actually has this stardew flower, and Shinji smugly replies that he does. The other doctor standing nearby claims that Shinji must be lying and must have clearly been eavesdropping on the prescription, but Lee tells him that doesn't explain how the kid got knowledge of the stardew flower. The other doctor is certain he must have seen it online or something, but they don't realize that Shinji had exchanged his points for some stardew flower. He tells the other doctor to quit his yapping and shows him the flower. Lee and the others are shocked at the sight of the flower, and he wonders how this kid can possess a legendary medicine like this. Eventually, Shinji asks if he now believes he can cure the girl, so Lee quickly apologizes for his rash judgment and pleads with him to heal her with it. When Shinji approaches Mika, he promises himself that he'll never let anyone hurt Mika in this life. He places the flower on her, and it releases its essence into her, causing her temperature to immediately begin rising. Suddenly, Mika opens her eyes and wonders who Shinji is, but he tells her just to rest well because they'll meet soon. Shinji soon goes to tell Mr. Matsumoto that Mika has recovered, and he advises that he keep taking care of her. Matsumoto thanks him deeply, and Lee asks Shinji to join him for some tea later, but Shinji proposes they make it another time because he's in a hurry. Regardless, Lee asks for his name, so Shinji tells him it's Fuji Shinji. Later that evening, Shinji goes through his computer looking for a website that explains how cultivation works that he remembers from his past life. When he finds it, he sees the different levels of cultivation, and he remembers that he had only reached level 3 in his past life. Shortly after, he focuses on cultivation using the Brahma Inferno art, whose power is on a whole different level. He promises himself to dedicate himself to training so he'll reach the Supreme Emperor level, which is the highest one. Meanwhile, a man named Chairman Yan asks Dr. Lee if it's true that he encountered a boy with stardew flower who already had spiritual energy. Lee admits this is true and explains that this boy must be a prodigy in spiritual cultivation, and he believes he might change the world if he grows stronger. Chairman Yan immediately sends some other chick to go measure Shinji's strength, and he tells Lee that this is an amazing discovery if it's true. Meanwhile, Shinji awakens great power using the Violet Secret Art, and he reaches level 2 in his first training session. He soon notices he's dirty and wonders why since he only skipped bathing for a day, and he soon goes to get something to eat. He heads out to find the nearest convenience store. While he's walking, the chick from before watches him from above a streetlight and hopes this guy won't disappoint her. To test him, she throws a disc covered with purple energy, and it falls behind him and explodes. Out of the explosion, a monstrous wolf emerges, and Shinji is excited to see that the mutation has already begun. The wolf growls at Shinji, so he covers his face because of how much it stinks and jumps back when the monster lunges at him. When he dodges, the monster attacks him with its tail and manages to hit Shinji in the leg. Shinji jumps backward to create a gap, and he generates flames from his hand to roast the monster, so he smashes the monster into the ground, using a move called Flame Emperor Fist. The impact causes blood to spew out of the monster's mouth, and the lady watching from above is shocked at what she just saw. After taking down the monster, Shinji calls it pathetic for dying after one hit. When he realizes he's even hungrier, he turns around to quickly grab a bite. Meanwhile, the lady from before is shocked that this guy just destroyed a mutant beast with a punch, and she wonders who on earth he is. She also wonders how he was able to awaken the fire attribute, which has the strongest attack power, so she jumps down to check on the mutant beast. When she comes closer, she notices its tail has broken and wonders how. She recalls a loud sound when it smashed its tail on Shinji's body, so she wonders how hard the boy's body is. The next day, Shinji feels intense pain after waking up, and he realizes he still has a long way to go in his training. When he goes into the living room, he hears the news that an unprecedented high temperature of 8 degrees was recorded at the summit of Mount Shiranui, and a descent order has been issued for all climbers on the mountain. Shinji recalls from his past life that the high temperature at the mountain's summit must have been caused by the awakening of the fire attribute spiritual energy, so he considers this a chance to absorb immense fire attribute spiritual energy. He rushes out but finds Rin at the door, who comes to ask him for the 200k yen for the bag. Annoyed, Shinji tells her to go get herself checked and reminds her to stay away from him. Rin claims he's doing this on purpose to get his attention, and she tells him she won't bother him anymore if he doesn't give her the money. But Shinji storms out and tells her to get lost. At the mountain, people gather behind police yellow no-cross lines, and some of the police struggle to keep people away from the lines so they don't get burned. The airheads, amidst the people, insist that they're lying and the mountain isn't that hot, and when one of them throws a corn past the line, it turns into popcorn immediately. They're shocked that the police weren't lying, so they start to rush back. Meanwhile, Shinji watches the whole thing and is glad the fire attribute is overflowing here, and he hopes to be able to reach a higher level by absorbing this energy. Despite the police's protest, he jumps past the line, but the officers who notice him tell him to immediately get back so he doesn't die. Shinji wonders if the fire attribute is really that strong, and when his body starts to absorb it, he feels like every cell in his body is on fire. The energy fills up his body and he promises himself to become strong in this life. Meanwhile, the others wonder what's going on with Shinji and why fire is shooting out of his eyes. When Shinji notices he's attracted too much attention, he decides to leave, so he jumps away while the people gossip that he must be a god or an immortal. Suddenly the temperature drops, and the police wonder how that happened while the people try to get the entire thing on camera. The officer in charge is shocked and wonders if the kid he saw was really a god. That night, the news announces that a mysterious boy appeared near the summit of the mountain and that the extreme weather phenomenon was resolved by him. Meanwhile, Chairman Yan makes a call to stop the Mount Shiranui news immediately so it doesn't create mass panic. After that, he asks the girl from before if she really witnessed Shinji defeat the mutant monster with a single punch, and she admits that he did, and that the monster didn't seem to hurt him at all. The chairman decides that these two occurrences must be the handiwork of two different geniuses, so he suggests recruiting Shinji into their organization before other factions make a move. He immediately orders the girl to go meet the boy. Meanwhile, Shinji continues his cultivation, and he's glad that he's finally reached level 2. Because he's reached the level called the Boundary of Bubbling Spring, he gets an additional attribute slot as a bonus. Apart from that, he also unlocks a function called Magic Infusion. This allows him to permanently infuse one of his internal attributes into a weapon, but the durability of the weapon depends on the weapon's material. Shinji is excited that he can create custom weapons, so he tries it out on a kitchen knife. Suddenly, he hears a knock on the door and goes to check who's there. At the door, he finds the chairman and the other lady. Chairman Yan apologizes for his sudden visit and introduces himself as Yan Jingtora, the president of the Spiritual Energy Training Association. He introduces the lady as Yue, his subordinate, and says they came to talk to him about spiritual chi cultivation. Shinji finds this amazing, and he remembers how one of them saved him and Mika in his past life. Even though they saved him in his past life, he doesn't want to have any connection to them in this life, so he asks them how they found out about him. Chairman Yan mentions how he treated Mika Matsumoto and mentions that Dr. Lee, who is a member of their organization, told them about him. This intrigues Shinji, and he realizes they don't seem to have any bad intentions. He lets them in, and they have a chat, so they find out he's not interested in joining them. Shinji replies that he doesn't like the idea of working in an organization, and he says he'll think about it after his spiritual chi revives once he's trained on his own. Suddenly, Yue tells him that she knows he's reached the boundary of spirit awakening at level 1. But she mentions that he only got there by sheer luck. She offers their guidance to help him reach the boundary of bubbling spring. She also adds that soon the earth will undergo a major transformation, and cultivating spiritual chi will be the only way to survive. Because of that, she offers that he joins them for guidance. She tells him about how she also thought she could awaken naturally on her own and refused the association's offer. But she explains that she couldn't after 3 years, yet she was able to in less than a year of joining. In 3 years, she was able to reach the boundary of bubbling spring. That shocks Shinji, so he asks her how old she is now if it took her 3 years. And she tells him she's 21 and asks why he's asking. He realizes that's quite slow, but he decides to keep it in his mind, so he tells her she's a genius instead. However, Yue mentions that everyone in the association is a genius because only geniuses can enter the association. Chairman Yan reminds Shinji that he'll receive a lot of support if he joins them, but he soon asks to be excused when he receives a call. When Yan picks up the call, he's told that a level 2 mutant beast has appeared just 30 kilometers from where he is. This shocks him, so he asks what the monster's attribute is, and he's told that it's most likely poison since it's a giant venomous snake. Chairman Yan orders that they lock down the area and says he and Yue will go there immediately. Liu apologizes to Shinji because they have to deal with an emergency and proposes they talk some other time. When they head out, Shinji remembers how he promised himself that he wouldn't be weak in this life or suffer humiliation. His ability is at the beginner stage of the boundary of bubbling spring, but he knows it won't be easy to go past this point. He wonders if there's any fire-attributed spiritual chi around, but he suddenly gets a call that shocks him. It's from a friend who asks him to help because his house is haunted. Shinji asks what he means, so the guy tells him that thunder has been rumbling all day in the mountain behind his house, even though there's no rain. Shinji wonders if the rare lightning-attributed spiritual chi has resurfaced, so he asks his friend Kotuj to tell him everything he knows. Kotuj tells him the sky is pitch black, but the thunder won't stop, so Shinji confirms that it's the lightning spiritual chi. Apparently, there are 3 levels of spiritual chi. One is the common attributes, which include water, fire, wind, and earth. The second is the rare attributes, which include ice, light, darkness, and lightning. The third is the legendary attribute that includes the void, among others. Since Shinji just got a new attribute slot, he considers this his chance to get the lightning attribute. He quickly heads there and asks his friend to guide him to the mountain, and he asks him to ensure no one goes near it. Meanwhile, a lady named Kari asks two guys to come with her on their first mission, so one of the guys asks her where they're going. She informs them that a powerful lightning attribute, spiritual chi, seems to have shown up on a certain mountain, and they have to recover all of it before it spreads. Shortly after, Shinji reaches the foot of the mountain, and he's excited to find the lightning-attributed spiritual energy. He chooses the lightning attribute in his system, but he's told that it will take twice the usual amount to absorb the lightning energy. But he clicks yes to proceed. After that, the system gives him the blue lightning wind slash technique. Shinji is amazed by the immense power it contains, and he's glad the energy is finally his. Meanwhile, Kaori and her men watch the lightning from another place, and the guys ask her if they can really collect something like this, and if it'll fit into such a small container. She tells them to quit yapping and collects the container, which she uses to suck in the lightning spiritual energy. The guys are excited to witness how amazing she is, but Kaori becomes worried when she notices a crack in the container, and she wonders why the spirit collector can't handle this. A sudden explosion occurs, and the container explodes, so one of the guys quickly jumps on her to save her. Kaori orders that they retreat because the spiritual energy is going out of control, but they suddenly notice a sound behind them. When they turn around, they notice Shinji, and Kaori wonders what a civilian is doing here. She immediately tells him to get out of here because it's no place for ordinary people, but Shinji is excited to see the lightning spiritual energy. He disregards their caution that he's going to get killed, and he runs into the lightning energy to absorb it. When his body collides with it, he starts to absorb the lightning, so the others believe that he must not be human. Kori can't believe her eyes because it's clear this guy is awakening an ultra-rare lightning-attributed spiritual energy. When the lightning power almost overwhelms Shinji, he refuses to let it defeat him. He tells the lightning that even the heavens and earth can't bring him down, because he'll make his name shake the world and even the gods. He tells the lightning to come at him, so he absorbs the whole thing until he starts to float in the air. Once he's done, he realizes it feels great, and his system tells him he's acquired fire and lightning-attributed spiritual energy. The system asks him if he'd like to fuse them into the legendary Thunder Flame attribute, so he excitedly starts the fusion. Once the fusion is complete, Shinji is shocked by the overwhelming power of the legendary attribute. Meanwhile, one of the agents of the organization informs Yue that only the white giant serpent has been detected close by. She realizes this monster could have the poison attribute, so she gives the men a jade talisman to crush if they're in danger to create a light attribute barrier to protect them. She warns them not to be reckless and to prioritize their safety. They step into the building to search, and two red eyes watch them from the ceiling. When Yue notices the snake going for one of the men, she rushes to push him out of the way. The men throw daggers at the snake, and Yue freezes it. While the men rejoice, Yue realizes something is wrong and tells them to run, and the snake soon breaks free of the ice. It releases a green gas from its mouth that knocks down the men, and Yue radios headquarters to tell them about the giant snake. But she collapses before she can finish her statement. Sometime later, Chairman Yan goes to speak with Shinji about his new attribute. The chairman also tells him he's the only one that he can rely on to help them deal with the snake. When Shinji sees the picture of the snake, he realizes that one of his old friends named Hinasaku would have wanted to get this unique attribute. Since they don't know what's going on with Yue, the chairman tells Shinji he's their only hope since he's awakened the fire attribute. Shinji wonders how he knows he's awakened the fire attribute, so the chairman stutters that he heard from Yue how he defeated the mutated beast dog when he asked her to watch over him before. Shinji realizes they were the ones who released the dog on him, so the chairman apologizes that it was necessary to maintain public safety. Eventually, Shinji agrees to go to the factory to defeat the giant snake. Excited, the chairman offers to give him any support or personnel he needs. In the factory, Yue wakes up and sees one of her paralyzed men calling the snake a bastard. In front of the men, the snake seems frozen, so Yue wonders if it's trying to evolve by absorbing something. She knows that they need to do something to purify the area soon, or this will turn into a massive disaster. When she manages to get up, the snake notices her and jumps toward her, but Yue isn't going down without a fight. She attacks the snake with some ice crystals, but to her surprise, the snake knocks her down. As she falls back injured, she finds it impossible to believe that the snake had already evolved before they got here. She realizes they won't be able to stop this snake if things continue like this. When the snake closes in on her, Shinji enters and considers it a crazy coincidence because he used to work in this factory after high school. When Yue notices him, he tells her that Chairman Yan told him to help them. Yue tells him to run away because the opponent is too strong for him since it's already at level 3. But Shinji doesn't listen and tells her that those who need rescue among them should wait for reinforcement. He checks out the snake, which goes for his head immediately. Afraid, Yue tells him to run away immediately, but Shinji is suddenly covered with lightning and fire, and he smugly promises to crush the snake with one strike. As the snake comes closer, he punches it with his Thunder Flame attribute, knocking the poor creature several feet backward. Yue watches, as if she's just seen a miracle, and the snake quickly tries to escape through the wall it broke through when it realizes it's in big trouble. Yue tells Shinji not to let the snake escape, but Shinji brings out his sword to finish it off. His sword is imbued with the legendary Thunder Flame attribute, so he rushes toward the snake to dice it like sushi. It doesn't take long, and Yue is shocked to learn that he's awakened two attributes. Shinji recalls that the Spiritual Energy Training Association doesn't have any ill wishes and that they help people, so it shouldn't be a bad idea if they know about it. He admits that he's awakened fire and lightning, and Yue wonders how much stronger this boy will get. Sometime later, she reports this to the chairman, and he realizes that's why Shinji warned them not to monitor him. The chairman believes they must get him to join their association, so Yue asks if they should give up on monitoring him, and the chairman asks Yue if she doesn't think it's time to get a boyfriend. Sometime later, the Spiritual Energy Training Association has a meeting where some people believe they should announce that the spiritual energy has returned. One of them believes they can no longer keep it a secret because of the frequent occurrences. Some other guy believes he's talking trash because the world will fall into chaos if they announce stuff like that, and they'd regret it. However, the first guy believes that announcing is better, because at least it would have allowed them to warn the residents of the factory to evacuate before the incident. His opponent insists that they resolve the issue, but the first man insists that the first guy didn't resolve it, but some guy they called in. When the argument becomes more heated, Chairman Yan tells them to keep quiet. He asks them to take their seats and agrees with the first guy that he has a point because he might have lost his daughter, subordinates, and residents if not for the guy they called in. Because of that, he proposes they turn the locations they've confirmed that spiritual energy revival is happening in and use them as testing grounds. He suggests they build one as a tourist attraction and monitor how it affects the officials before determining their next course of action, and the men agree that it's a great idea. Since they don't object, he brings up the other issue he wants to discuss. He brings up Shinji's abilities and mentions that he wants to invite him to their Spiritual Energy Training Association. He says he'd like to appoint him as a leader of a squad and asks what they think. One of them agrees to letting Shinji join, but he doesn't like the idea of giving him such a high position immediately. The other guy agrees too, saying that this will cause dissatisfaction among the lower ranks. However, the chairman asks if they really saw his abilities because Shinji has awakened dual attributes of thunder and fire. He believes that putting him in a low rank can offend him, and they don't want to make someone like him an enemy. Because of that, the first guy suggests that the chairman prepare a test for him. The others agree that they will agree better if they can assess Shinji's abilities as a squad leader, and it brings good results. Intrigued, Chairman Yan tells them not to regret their suggestion later. The next morning, Shinji wakes up groggy as always, and when he hears a noise, he wonders if he's being burgled. He rushes outside to see the thief who's stealing from a poor fellow like him, so he opens the door and angrily tells the person to stop there. However, it turns out to be Yue, who's doing some cleaning, and she greets him good morning. Confused, he greets her too, but he suddenly wonders why she's in his house, especially after they promised not to spy on him yesterday. Calmly, Yue explains that she didn't come to spy on him, but to live with him. Shinji is first shocked and then terrified. Later, he learns about the tests they want him to take. He remembers that it's just a few days until the 3-Chi Grand Gathering, and he tells himself he doesn't have time to waste on things like this. He tells Yue that he's not going to do it, so Yue tells him that this won't interfere with his training because a special location has been chosen for him. She points out that it's a place where spiritual energy revived recently, where they have new participants and there's a chance he'll meet strong comrades. Shinji remembers that a friend named Hakaru joined this organization, so he asks if Mika is joining the academy too. He learns that she is, so Shinji remembers that Mika once told him she was greatly blessed during the training in the Black Division, so he wonders if something happened during this test. He decides to go find out and tells Yue that he has some business with Mika. Sometime later, Chairman Yan addresses some members. He tells them to forget the peaceful life because a world of death is approaching. He tells them he'll introduce them to an advanced spiritual energy practitioner who will lead them all as their captain. Mika stands among them, and Kaori stands nearby too, wondering where the person she saw that night went. She remembers telling a superior about someone who awakened wrapped in divine light, but he doesn't believe her because no one is so strong. Next to her, another member named Ken asks her what she's thinking about, so she says she was just wondering what kind of person the captain is. Ken believes the captain must be some rich, privileged kid, so he decides that he'll rough the guy up so he'll understand who's the strongest around here, while the others praise him. However, Kaori warns him not to get carried away and cause trouble. Meanwhile, Yue shows Shinji the team he will be leading, and explains that it contains 5 members, 2 women and 3 men. Shinji reads the reports and notices the others have fairly common attributes, other than Mika's ice attribute. Yue also informs Shinji to pay special attention to Yoshi Ken, who used to be part of the underworld before he joined the association after awakening his wind attribute. Apparently, he has a fiery personality and hates taking orders. When they get closer, Chairman Yan announces to them that their captain has arrived, and Mika wonders if this is the person her father told her had saved her. Nearby, Kaori recognizes him as the guy who was wrapped in lightning energy on the mountain. When the chairman introduces Shinji, Ken stops him and asks the chairman if he's sure about this guy's ability. He complains that he could just drag them down if he turns out to be dead weight, and that will cause no one to listen to his orders. Excited, Shinji asks him if he'd like to test it out, and that pleases Ken. Shinji asks Ken if he thinks trash that's at the level of a bubbling spring can stand against him, and Ken asks him if he wants to die. He dashes towards Shinji with his wind energy to land a punch, but Shinji just asks him if this is all he's got. Before he can land his punch, Chairman Yan grabs his punch midair and asks him if he's planning to disobey the organization's orders. Ken quickly apologizes and says that was not his plan, but he expected the new captain to prove his strength so that he'll be able to command respect. The other guys agree with Ken since they're wrapped around his fingers, but Chairman Yan responds that they've confirmed Shinji's strength when he single-handedly took down a giant snake and saved Yue. It shocks Kaori when she learns that this guy was able to save Senior Yue, and Ken insists that he must have defeated the giant snake by luck. Eventually, the chairman states that anyone who disobeys his orders will be expelled and tells them to remain quiet. He proceeds to explain the details of their mission and says they'll have to defeat a creature known as the Thorn Monster. Based on their info, this creature takes up the form of a human and moves freely. He tells them to forget the idea that the world is still safe and to learn to keep death by their side. When they get into the forest, Shinji wonders if they're in the right place because he doesn't see any monsters, and he wonders if they're hiding underground. Eventually, Mika asks him if they're going ahead or if they've missed the way. Shinji senses the spiritual energy getting stronger the closer they get to the giant tree nearby, but he doesn't sense the presence of any monsters. To be safe, he tells his teammates not to get close to the tree. He tells them to search the area to see if they can find any clues about the monster, and the ladies receive the orders. However, Ken asks Shinji if he's scared of the big tree, and the other guys laugh. Regardless, Shinji warns them again and tells them they'll take full responsibility for their actions if they ignore his instructions. Annoyed, Ken turns, and the guys check around the tree in defiance. Ken believes the tree is incredible because he's never seen something with such energy before. The other guys agree that they might be able to level up under the tree if they train there. Ken believes that he should be able to absorb the tree's energy and reach spring level 3 so that even Yue will be forced to acknowledge him. He pictures a time when all the ladies in the association cling to him like their daddy, and he excitedly decides to train to make his dreams come true. All three guys sit to cultivate, but Shinji leaves them there. As they walk away, Mika asks Shinji if he thinks the guys will be alright, so he says they should be fine, but he'll handle it if anything happens. While they're walking, Kaori asks Shinji if they met a few days ago, but he says he doesn't remember. When she brings up the mountain filled with lightning, he recognizes her and asks if she was just visiting the mountain that day. Shocked, Kaori explains they were dispatched to investigate the lightning's spiritual energy, and she accuses him of making her superior scold her for hours. She says she kept explaining that someone had absorbed the lightning element's spiritual energy, but they refused to believe her. Pushed to a corner, Shinji decides to apologize. Eventually, Shinji tells the ladies to remain on the spot because the spiritual energy there is plentiful. Mika asks him if he's not also going to train, and Shinji notices that Mika is just as kind as in his previous life. He replies that the spiritual energy here doesn't match his attribute, so they can train without him. As they're about to begin, they hear a cry for help, and it turns out the tree has started to whoops the boys' behinds. Apparently, it just started moving on its own. When one of the boys pleads that he doesn't want to die yet, Ken swoops in bravely to save him, and he attacks one of the tree's vines, but his blade doesn't do much damage. This shocks him, and he can't believe it, but he's soon knocked down by another vine from the tree. As he falls to his death, he remembers how the chairman told them that death will always remain by their side when they step into the world of energy cultivation. He collapses on the ground, wondering if it's game over for him, but a sudden bright light burns through the tree's vines. Shinji appears before him and tells him to run away. Ken gets up and insists that he can't abandon his comrades and leave, so Shinji acknowledges his guts. Ken insists that only the worst kind of men abandon their comrades. Eventually, Shinji infuses lightning flame energy into his knife, throws it at one of the vines, and cuts down one of the boys being held bound by the tree. That annoys the tree, so Shinji tells the boys to get out of there once he sets them all free. When an earthquake begins, they all fear that the monster is about to appear, and the tree transforms into a level 3 thorn monster. The boys almost shit their pants, but Shinji reminds them not to be afraid of death like the chairman told them. He covers his body in thunder flame and tells them to quit training if they are afraid of death. As the monster comes in for the kill, Shinji dodges its attack and keeps dodging even when the monster tries to land a hit. When he leaps into the air, the monster releases several vines after him, so Shinji creates a barrier of fire to burn the vines before they touch him. The fire overwhelms the monster's hand, so Shinji uses a move called Lightning Flame Fist to tear through the monster's chest in an instant. The boys almost drop their jaws, and Kari can't believe the power of a lightning attribute awakener. Mika thinks about heroes from novels and figures this is how they are. Meanwhile, the men from the organization watch the fight on their system, and they can't believe that Shinji possesses such strength. Chairman Yan eventually asks them if they have any objections to his decision, and they all say they don't. When they feel a sudden earthquake, Yue asks the chairman if it's what she thinks it is, and he agrees that they can no longer keep this hidden. He says the Earth's spiritual energy has completely recovered, and the world is about to be turned upside down. In the forest, Shinji analyzes the thorn monster, and he remembers that Mika said she had a connection to this place in his past life. However, it doesn't make sense since Mika has a water attribute, and the thorn monster has a wood attribute. They suddenly witness a bright light from the ground, and Shinji figures that the ice attribute must be emerging from there since the Earth's energy has fully recovered. He remembers that Mika wasn't strong enough to absorb this properly in his past life, but Shinji breaks the ground open to see it well. Mika finds it incredible that he was able to disperse all the surrounding energy with a single blow, so Shinji tells her to go there and try absorbing the ice attribute energy to become stronger. She agrees, so he hopes they can grow stronger together in this life and take revenge on the people who killed Seizu. Shinji tells everyone he wants Mika to train here with this powerful energy since she has the ice attribute, so he asks them to wait for them. When they get back home, they celebrate heartily because Mika has now advanced from Shuizuan level 1 to Qi level 3. Mika admits that it's thanks to the captain and everyone, and Ken apologizes to Shinji for misjudging him. However, Shinji tells him not to worry about it since he at least had the guts to never abandon his comrades. This touches Ken because the captain is saying such kind words to him after all he's done, so he and the other guys pledge their lives to Shinji, which he finds awkward. Suddenly, they hear a notice for everyone present there to evacuate, and some soldiers appear to evacuate them. Shinji notices some spiritual energy coming from one of the soldiers, so he figures he must be a practitioner. He recalls that Chairman Yan was supposed to be handling this matter, so he decides to observe for a bit since this could be a chance for the trainees to level up if the burst of energy detected was from his team. When the soldiers notice they're not moving, one approaches them and tells Shinji to get up, but Ken wants him to watch his mouth when he's talking to his captain. The soldier points a gun at Ken's throat and tells him to leave if he doesn't want to die, so Ken activates his wind energy to get into a fight. However, Shinji stops him. 3 hours ago, a group meets to discuss the spiritual energy suddenly recovering and what they're supposed to do. One of them says the most urgent matter is to capture the mutant dog that escaped, but their leader silences them while they're arguing. The leader says it's their top priority to capture the mutant dog so it doesn't harm people. The leader entrusts someone named Kawasaki with the mission of capturing the mutant dog. He also tells the rest of them to move to the border because they won't be able to maintain peace here. Finally, he tells Kawasaki to ensure he captures the mutant dog by tomorrow morning. Shortly after, Kawasaki leads men to hurry the evacuation to the east because they don't know when the mutant dog will appear. Looking through his camera, he sees one of his soldiers getting into an altercation with Ken. In the restaurant, Shinji tells Ken not to cause trouble with military personnel, and Ken calms down. As they leave, Shinji tells his teammates that there was an explosion of ominous energy this afternoon, and they'll be living in an extremely dangerous world from now on. He reminds Mika not to forget her training when they return, because she can become stronger even though her spiritual sword is still unstable. Suddenly, Kawasaki approaches Shinji, and Shinji recognizes him, referring to him as Keita. They both seem glad to see each other, so Shinji introduces him to the guys as his high school classmate. To make a joke, Kawasaki insists that he's actually Shinji's big brother figure, but Shinji insists he's the big brother. Kaori eventually suggests they leave since both men must have a lot to catch up on, and they leave. When they catch up, Shinji is amazed to find out that Kawasaki has climbed the ranks and has become a military officer. Other than that, Kawasaki tells him he has some important info, so Shinji asks him if he's heard about the global recovery of spiritual energy. Kawasaki lets him in on a secret and says their unit was mobilized here because of a mutant dog that escaped and is hiding in the area. Shinji finds that interesting and wonders if it's the same mutant dog that Yu sent after him. Soon after, one of the soldiers informs Kawasaki that they've evacuated all the civilians, so they just have to wait for the mutant dog to show itself. This intrigues Shinji, and he hopes to get to see the military's strength. He asks Kawasaki if he can watch, and Kawasaki agrees because he considers this a good chance for Shinji to learn how dangerous the world has become. He agrees and tells one of his men, Hayakawa, to guide Shinji to the observation area. As Hayakawa leads Shinji away, he reminds him to follow his orders regardless of his relationship with Captain Kawasaki. Shinji just chuckles and agrees without a fight. When he gets to the observation area, he notices everyone carrying guns. Based on their spiritual energy, he notices most of them are around Wakusen level 1, which means they're pretty skilled. Suddenly, an alarm is raised that the mutant dog has appeared. Somewhere nearby, the dog growls at some soldiers who surround it, and they open fire on the beast. The bullets don't do anything but annoy it, so the beast releases purple energy from its mouth. Shinji finds this strange, and Kawasaki realizes they're in trouble because the monster is trying to evolve. He orders his men to stop it immediately so their entire unit doesn't get wiped out. The men rush in to fight, but they're easily pushed back by the monster's energy. Moments later, the wolf evolves and grows spikes on its body. At this point, Kawasaki concludes it's game over for them. After fighting it for a while, Kawasaki doesn't win, and he tells his men that they have no choice but to fight to protect the civilians. He orders the special forces after him, and they rush toward the monster, but it easily knocks them back with its slash of energy. The other soldiers watch with shock as their captain is knocked into a pile of rubble, and Kawasaki sees the monster running toward him, so he wonders if this is where his life ends. As the monster's about to pummel Kawasaki into the ground, Shinji steps in and stops it with one of his hands. Kawasaki can't believe his eyes, but Shinji tells the monster he'll die for laying his hand on his friend. He electrocutes the monster, causing it to jump back in pain. This surprises Kawasaki, so he asks Shinji if he was a cultivator all along. Shinji assures him they'll talk about it after he destroys this monster, and the other soldiers are shocked that this guy was able to damage a rank 4 mutant beast with one single strike. He prepares his blade and approaches the monster to finish their dance. Shinji prepares a lightning bolt, and when the mutant dog sees it, it turns around to make a run for it, but Shinji isn't ready to let it escape. With one swift movement, he throws the lightning bolt through the dog's back and it comes out in the front. Meanwhile, Kawasaki is helped by some soldiers, and he's amazed by Shinji's powerful lightning cultivation. With the dog weakened, Shinji fuses his thunder flame power with his blade and slices the mutant dog in half. The other soldiers are shocked that Shinji has already grown this strong after the Earth's spiritual energy just got restored, and they wonder how much of a monster he'll become if he continues at this rate. However, Kawasaki gloats that this is expected of his incredible friend. Meanwhile, Shinji notices the knife he used has disintegrated even though it was military grade, so he realizes he has to find a weapon that's powerful enough to endure his power. When he comes back down, Kawasaki praises his awesome power, and he finds it amazing that Shinji never let his awesome power show all this time. Even though he's injured, Kawasaki tells the soldiers to clean up and goes somewhere to chat with Shinji. Sometime later, Kawasaki shows a video of the mission to a superior of his, whom he tells that Shinji is more than a friend, but a brother. The woman believes that the strength of the military will skyrocket if they can recruit him, so she asks Kawasaki if he's convinced him to join them. Kawasaki admits that he tried, but Shinji's already a member of the Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association. When his superior hears that, she decides to send someone to the organization to negotiate things. The next day, Shinji gets home, so Yue asks him if he joined the military operation. He admits that it just happened and he wasn't planning it, but he had to because his friend was in danger. Eventually, Yue informs him that the Supreme Commander's granddaughter has been calling their chairman nonstop to get him. When Shinji asks, Yue explains that the chairman is crying to cover it all up, but the lady is persistent, so Yue suggests that Shinji watches his back for a few days. Suddenly, Shinji receives a call from Kawasaki, which turns out to be from Fuwa Natsuki, Kawasaki's superior. For a moment, he doesn't reply, so Natsuki tells him that she knows a place where an exceptionally strong fire attribute spiritual energy is developing. This catches Shinji's attention because he's been struggling to increase his fire attribute spiritual energy. When he meets up with Natsuki, she tells him that a fireball was spotted during a night patrol at a construction site. The workers thought it was a spirit, so they called in a medium, but that only made things worse until the fire started burning the entire site. The military sealed off the area and attempted to handle it, but nothing has worked. Shinji asks Natsuki if the fire is still spreading, and she says it is, and all they can do is to evacuate people around to minimize casualties. Out of nowhere, she asks him if he's still involved with Yue, which shocks him. He asks her to stop saying weird things and explains that Yue is only around to keep an eye on him. Natsuki replies that he doesn't need to deny it so vehemently and continues her story. She explains that creating a military force of cultivators has become a national priority since the Earth's spiritual energy has recovered. The problem so far is that most cultivators with potential tend to be unruly and incapable of being team players, but Natsuki points out that Kawasaki had said Shinji is not like that. He asks her if she wants him to join the military to train the next generation of cultivators, and she agrees, then offers excellent treatment if he agrees. Regardless, Shinji explains that he has to focus on training new talent at the Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association first. This intrigues Natsuki because it shows that Shinji is really a person of principle. When they get to the location, they find the police trying to restrict the usually stubborn people from passing through the do not cross lines. When they step down from the car, Rin, who's standing nearby with Yuto, asks Shinji what he's doing here. Shinji doesn't answer, so Yuto jokes that Shinji is following Rin around like a watchdog. When the members of the press sense the tension, they quickly focus their cameras on them to capture spicy things they can report on the news. Yuto tells Shinji that he knows he can't forget about Rin, but he reminds him that he will never be with her because he wasted his chance. The members of the crowd also ignore why they came to focus on this drama, but Shinji can't even imagine that Rin and Yuto would be saying this crap out loud. Eventually, Natsuki comes to ask Shinji what's wrong, and the press turns to focus on her because of her stunning beauty. When Yuto sees Natsuki's beauty, his mouth starts to water because of how far out of Rin's league she is, but Rin looks shocked. Immediately, Yuto goes in to introduce himself with an extended handshake, but Natsuki simply asks Shinji if these people are his friends, leaving Yuto hanging. Eventually, Shinji tells Natsuki that they're just bystanders and proposes they enter because they don't have time for this. They leave Yuto hanging, and he becomes the laughingstock of the crowd because of how he was rejected. Meanwhile, this annoys Rin, and she refuses to let this embarrassment go, so she promises to make Natsuki regret this. When she sees Yuto still staring, she calls him to order, so he quickly apologizes, and she realizes she would have dumped him long ago if he weren't rich. Meanwhile, Natsuki tells Shinji that the site workers have confirmed that the fire has increased, and they'd have to increase the safety perimeter. She says they need to find a quick solution, and she leads him to the area where the fire attribute spiritual energy is highly concentrated. She soon brings out a device to measure spiritual energy levels, and from her readings, she gives orders to extend the perimeter by 10 kilometers. While she's still speaking, she's shocked to see Shinji walking right into the fire she showed him. The freaked-out soldier nearby asks the vice commander if he should stop him, but Natsuki wonders if Shinji is really trying to control the fire. Shinji approaches the fire energy, and his system informs him that it has detected strong fire. Attribute spiritual energy he can absorb. He chooses to absorb it, and the energy begins pouring into his body. The flow is so strong that it almost blinds Natsuki and the soldiers with her, and this makes Natsuki wonder how powerful this guy is. She wonders if he'll reach advanced level 4 or level 5 if he absorbs all this energy. Meanwhile, Shinji's fire attribute spiritual energy reaches level 2, and he gains 1 draw as a bonus for a new fire attribute technique. Shinji uses his bonus to draw a new technique, and when he selects the option, the system tells him he hit a jackpot, which shocks him. Apparently, he got the Eternal Sacred Flame technique, a golden fire attribute technique. Since it's his first time getting a golden technique, he also gets 10 bonus points. With this technique, through training, he can store fire attribute energy within his body, allowing him to perform large-scale attacks from within. Excited, he decides to absorb every last bit of the fire energy, and he soon does that. This shocks Natsuki because she can't believe he absorbed all that fire energy by himself. When he's done, Natsuki is shocked to check if he's alright, but he tells her he's chill and thanks her for bringing him here. When she checks her device, it sparks and explodes, but Shinji quickly pulls her away from the explosion. In his embrace, Natsuki assures herself that she will make this man her own no matter what it takes. Later that evening, Natsuki confirms from Shinji if he really absorbed all the fire attribute spiritual energy into his body, and he asks her if there's a problem. She says there's none, and asks him what his current level is, so he says it's probably level 4 in the Yosen realm, and he believes he'll reach level 5 soon. This surprises Natsuki because she thought his level would be higher with all that power, so Shinji explains that his cultivation method is a bit unique. When he's unable to explain it, Natsuki decides not to press further because cultivators like to have their secrets, which he appreciates. Eventually, she asks him if he'll reconsider joining the military, still offering him better treatment than what he gets at the association. Regardless, he turns down the offer for now, so Natsuki agrees not to force him. Meanwhile, Yue receives a message from the chairman for her to ask Shinji to handle a certain issue called the Shadow Subjugation mission later. He warns her to be careful since all the spiritual energy has been recovered, and she agrees. Later, Yue recalls how Shinji gladly agreed to go with Natsuki. The next morning, Shinji wakes up to the great smell of food, which he's certain is coming from Yue because she's a great cook. He excitedly goes into the kitchen, but he's completely shocked to see Natsuki sitting on his couch with some takeout. When he asks what she's doing, she tells him she used the military official procedures to register his home as a classified military site. This annoys him, so he asks her why she didn't ask him, and he goes to confront Yue about the whole thing. For some reason, he doesn't find her in her room, so Natsuki guesses that Yue must have left because she knew she was coming. However, Shinji checks out the mission file on the table and learns about a shadow subjugation mission. He hopes Yue didn't go alone, so he rushes out. When Natsuki asks him where he's rushing to, he explains that Yue is in danger and he has to see the chief immediately. Meanwhile, Yue swims underwater to get away from someone and she realizes she can't do anything without Shinji there. She wonders when she became so weak, then turns around to fire her assailant with ice. The ice she fires lands, and she's excited that she did it, but she's shocked to see a monstrous fish try to swallow her from behind. Yue quickly fires back at the fish with her ice powers, but it releases a loud screech that destabilizes her. She doesn't understand what's going on, but soon realizes that the monster is trying to drain her spiritual energy. So as not to let the monster become stronger, Yue decides to fight back and swim upwards, but she's soon slammed down by a giant octopus. The hit makes her mouth bleed, and as she collapses into the water, she wonders if this is game over for her. Suddenly, a bright streak of lightning appears in the water controlled by Shinji, who comes to check on her. She tells him to run away because the monster seems to be absorbing their spiritual energy, so Shinji tries to get Yue to safety first. He emerges from the water with her and runs into Natsuki, who asks him if he's defeated the monster. He tells her he's not, but asks her to take care of Yue, so Natsuki offers to take her to the hospital. Shinji decides not to enter the water immediately, but he promises to come back to visit once Yue recovers. When Yue is admitted into the hospital, the chairman profusely thanks Shinji because he saved her life in the nick of time. Shinji expresses his gladness and asks for more info about the mission. So the chairman tells him the monster is called a shadow. Apparently, they've been monitoring it for over 6 months, at a time when only fewer than 10 people in the world were practicing spiritual energy cultivation. Because they never saw the monster's body, they suspected that it used dark energy to hide its body deep in the ocean while absorbing its surroundings to grow stronger. Because of the recent spiritual surge, the monster has become greatly powerful, and they need to take care of it soon before it becomes a danger to civilians. The chairman asks Shinji if he'll help them out, and he agrees as long as he's granted one request. That night, Natsuki has a call with her grandfather, and she asks him why he's making Shinji do something. The old man says this is Shinji's real trial, both for himself and the country. But Natsuki still insists that the mission is way too dangerous. She reminds him that the military had previously dispatched a small division to handle the mission, but they all failed, even though they were Yosen level 3 or higher. Even though he understands, her grandfather explains they have no choice, and comforts her by saying he's assigned 3 elite soldiers to help Shinji out. He warns that they can't afford to fall behind other nations due to the recent changes, so that they're not invaded. The old man explains that the shadow exists in one of the most dangerous places that they classified as at least an A-rank zone. He believes that their country can gain recognition if they can secure an A-rank hard zone. Shortly after, Natsuki thinks about Shinji, and she hopes he comes back safely. Meanwhile, Shinji finds a new sword that he likes, and he brings Mika with him on a mission. Confused, she asks why she's the only one here from the team, so Shinji explains that she's the only one who has reached General Level 3, and he's doing this to ensure she's been keeping up with her training. She promises not to slow him down and promises to do her best, but he tells her not to be tense and informs her that the military will also send them backup. When they get to a port, Shinji and Mika step out to meet some members of the military. Upon seeing them approaching, one of the men comments that the new generation of cultivators is quite young. When they get close, Shinji asks if they're with the military, but the guy who spoke earlier introduces himself as Kuraki and tells Shinji not to slow them down. This annoys Mika, who asks if he even knows how strong their commander is, but the female military officer quickly steps in to dissolve the tension and apologize for Kuraki's sharp tongue. Meanwhile, the third guy ignores the whole thing and suggests they start moving. Eventually, Shinji tells Mika not to let their words get to her because they just need to focus on their job. Soon after, they all go underwater. While they're swimming, Kuraki starts to feel like something is draining his spiritual energy from within, and his comrades identify that this must be the dangerous effect of the dark attribute. Meanwhile, Mika tells Captain Shinji that she feels nauseous because of the nasty smell, so Shinji creates a barrier of lightning energy to block the influence of the dark energy around them. Kuraki turns around to check on Shinji and the girl to know if they're shivering in fear, since even pros like them are struggling. But he's shocked to see that they're not even affected at all. Kuraki suspects that they're using all their energy to block it, but he worries that they'll be unable to react in time when danger comes if they keep this up. Suddenly, the men notice something move past, and they spot the mutant fish monster coming at them. Mika tries to go in guns blazing, but Shinji tells her to observe first because that thing isn't the real body of the monster. This surprises her, but Kuraki rushes in and punches the monster. When he does that, he smugly turns around to tell them not to space out, but Mika tells him he just destroyed an illusion. Kuraki doesn't believe her, and while he's arguing, the octopus monster shoots up its tentacles and surrounds the men. Its influence affects the men, and the lady among them can't believe that a powerful monster at Yosen level 5 exists in this place. Immediately, Mika goes in with her frozen scythe waltz attack, but Kuraki asks her if she's tripping because the monster is clearly out of her league. Regardless, Mika decides to take out the monster to prove herself worthy to the captain. With one strike of her scythe, she destroys the tentacles she had initially frozen. The monster is also frozen, so Mika rejoices that they've done it, but the monster soon materializes and attacks the other men who are trying to run. The monster moves in to destroy Mika, but she protects herself with an ice shell, which the monster soon breaks through. As she laments her possible death, Shinji appears by her side and commends her before using his imbued sword to stop the attack of the cockroach. The others are shocked to see that he stopped the tentacle's attacks, and the blonde man is amazed by how his fire attribute spiritual energy works. Meanwhile, Shinji decides to take vengeance on the octopus for messing with Yue the last time. He breaks out his new golden arts and then dashes forward to stick it into the monster's head. However, Kuraki calls him a fool because a mere stab can't damage a Yosen level 5 creature, but Shinji soon activates his eternal sacred fire technique to infuse the power into his sword. This releases a great deal of golden flames that set the octopus on fire and light it up like Christmas lights. As the monster burns and roars in pain, Kuraki wonders what sort of power this is. Eventually, Kuraki recalls that the things his Supreme Commander said must have been true. He remembers asking the Supreme Commander why he's giving the trainees special treatment since they haven't undergone military training and are nobodies. However, the commander tells him that Shinji's abilities can't be ignored. The commander explains that even though the current trainees they have are much stronger than average people, they're no more than infants in Shinji's eyes. In the present, Kuraki can't believe Shinji is human, and he realizes his growth would be terrifying if he went through military training. He also noticed that Mika stayed cool through the dangerous situation, and she's already at bubbling level 3, even though she's young. Suddenly, the others come to check on Kuraki when they catch him spacing out. Kuraki says he's fine and suggests they apologize to the others later and invite them out for a drink. Later, he thanks Shinji for saving them and apologizes for his previous rudeness. However, Shinji admits that he doesn't mind because he knows he acted that way because he was worried about them. Shortly after, they all head out, but Shinji decides to stay back, so he tells them to go without him because he thinks there's something down here. He swims back downwards and he finds 2 stardew flowers. With this, he's certain that Mika and Yue can both improve their abilities. When he finally gets out, he can't find the others, but some other military officer approaches him to ask if he's Shinji. Shinji is surprised by his presence because he didn't sense him coming close at all. And when he asks, the guy says his name is Tokido Light, and he's serving as Lady Natsuki's assistant. He hands Shinji his business card and says he was on a mission until a few days ago, so he was unable to come greet him, but he asks him to reach out if Natsuki ever causes him any trouble. Shinji realizes this guy must be Natsuki's bodyguard, and he wonders if his strength has reached the Iron Vein state. Eventually, he asks Tokido if he needs something from him and asks about Mika's whereabouts. Tokido explains that Mika was taken back home as well as the others, but he's been waiting here because the Supreme Commander wishes to meet him. This shocks Shinji when he realizes he's referring to the military's Supreme Commander, so he enters the car. At the entrance, he spots an old man and asks if he's Supreme Commander Fuwa, and Commander Fuwa tells him he's heard about him from his granddaughter. Commander Fuwa invites him in and tells him that Natsuki said to him that he's capable of storing fire energy in his body. This doesn't surprise the commander because of how crazy the world is now, so he tells him that it's a miracle that a powerhouse like him has emerged. When Shinji says he was only lucky, the commander likes his composure and sees why his granddaughter took an interest in him. Eventually, the commander tells him that the world is now in a period of transformation, and life has become difficult for ordinary people who can't adapt. Regardless, Shinji assures him that he won't abandon ordinary people, so the commander tells him he may need to level up quickly. Apparently, darkness is the most troublesome energy, and it turns all living beings into mindless monsters. Since lightning energy is the most effective force to counter darkness, the commander explains that he needs him to grow stronger as soon as possible for his sake and for the country's sake. With that being said, Shinji promises to devote himself to training even more. Eventually, the commander hands him a military-exclusive phone to communicate with him if he needs anything. Immediately, Shinji nervously makes a request and shows the chairman the weapon that was crafted by Chairman Yan, which is now cracked because it couldn't withstand his energy. The commander is surprised by the state of the sword because he knows that the sword was one of Yanagi's most treasured creations, and he wonders how powerful the energy within Shinji truly is. Regardless, he tells Shinji to leave the sword with him so he can have several stronger ones made. When Shinji steps out, he gets a call from Chairman Yan that Yue is in trouble. Somewhere else, Yue's heart rate starts to drop, and the doctors rush to absorb an elemental orb from her body. One doctor counters that she's been in a coma for some time, and her remaining energy will go out of control if they forcibly extract her spiritual energy. The other asks if they're just waiting for her to die, and the chairman beats himself up for this outside. Suddenly, Shinji shows up and asks what Yue's condition is and why this happened since she was stable earlier. Confused, the chairman asks him if he knows the properties of dark attribute energy, so Shinji remembers that dark energy robs living creatures of their mind. The chairman agrees and states that Yue has always been strong, but she started doubting her own abilities after Shinji saved her. That's why she went on the mission without consulting him. The chairman blames himself for not knowing, so he could assign the mission to both of them. Immediately, Shinji summons his system to ask if there's a way to save Yue, and the system asks him to contact Yue's body so it can scan for a way to save her. Shinji immediately barges into the surgery theater, and the doctors demand that he leave because they're in the middle of an emergency. However, Shinji pushes them out of the way and tells them to stop acting tough when they can't save her. Shinji holds her hands, and he tells the system it must save her, so it initiates the search. This confuses the doctors, so they tell him to let go of her hand because that won't save her, and they tell him to get out. When they try to call security, and they ask who let the kid in, Chairman Yan tells them he gave permission. That shuts them up, but they try to explain to the chairman that they need to treat Yue's wound immediately, but the chairman tells them to let Shinji try. Meanwhile, Shinji's system continues his search and eventually suggests a treatment method that involves putting Stardew flowers into her body and also injecting her body with lightning energy. Immediately, he tells the chairman he's found a way to save Yue, but he needs everyone to leave the theater. That doesn't sit well with the doctors, so Shinji covers his body with lightning energy and explains that he can't guarantee their safety in this situation. When the chairman tells them to listen to him, they immediately head out, so Shinji grinds the Stardew flower with his powers and feeds it to Yue. That causes lightning energy to rip through her body, and Shinji promises to bring her back to life. Hours later, Yue wakes up and sees Shinji by her side. Shinji is glad she's awake, and he tells her to stop doing reckless things from now on. Confused, she asks him if he saved her, so he tells her he was lucky to find 2 Stardew flowers underwater because he would have been unable to save her. Eventually, Yue says he must think she's a burden, so he asks her why he'd think that. He tells her she's incredibly strong since she's at Spring Source level 3, and there are barely any fighters in the world at that level. Regardless, Yue believes she's weaker than him, but he tells her not to be stubborn because she's not weak, but he's just too strong. He asks her if she's seen anyone stronger than him, and Yue realizes he's right. Eventually, Shinji heads back to go to sleep and asks her to meet him in the outskirts forest early the day after tomorrow so they can do rehab training. 2 days later, Yue takes down a mutant monster easily, and Shinji tells her she's amazing. Apparently, the monster is at the highest level of Spring Source level 3, and she was able to take it down in one hit. He believes her power must have reached Spring Source level 4 at this point. However, Yue tells him to stop flattering her because she knows her own strength, so Shinji jokingly proposes they wrap things up. Suddenly, they hear an explosion, and an announcement is made of a surge of strong dark energy. Also, Shinji detects a violent surge of fire energy deep in the forest. Meanwhile, some guys camp in the forest. Amidst them, Yuto tells Rin he'll catch a big fish later and suggests they grill it together. She's obviously disgusted and tells him she doesn't need that, so she goes to help another lady named Koyuki. After she storms off, some other guy asks Yuto what's wrong with Rin, so he says she's been like this ever since she saw a stunning beauty a few days ago. The other guy realizes Yuto must have been checking out a beautiful lady. And he admits that the girl was unbelievably beautiful, and it makes the new guys curious to meet the new girl. However, the new guy doesn't know his girlfriend can hear him, so she drags him by the ear to set up their tent and tells him not to miss this opportunity. Yuto decides to head out to gather some twigs, and he notices a flower imbued with dark energy. In a flashback, Rin watches as a reporter explains that the World Union has announced that the Earth has entered the Qi restoration era. Apparently, experts have said there are now chances to interact with spiritual energy worldwide. In the present, he figures that this flower may contain the power that he needs to become king and get that hot lady he saw that day. He also sees this as an opportunity to crush Shinji and humiliate him in front of Natsuki. He immediately gobbles up the flower and realizes it has a nasty kick to it. His body is overtaken by the dark energy, and the destructive power excites him. Shortly after, he hears a cry for help, which turns out to be the others who are surrounded by mutant beasts. In a moment, Yuto shows up and kicks the wolves to oblivion. Rin tries to warn him that it's dangerous, but he assures her that they're nothing but insects to him. She doesn't understand how Yuto got so strong and wonders if humans can actually wield such powers. However, Yuto's male friends realize this must be the Qi cultivator thing they've been talking about on the news. When Rin hears that, she decides that a strong man like him is just what she needs. Meanwhile, Shinji warns Yue that he senses dark attribute Qi approaching, and they both jump onto a ledge to hide. Immediately, a group of mutant wolves runs past them, and Yue wonders what happened to this pack of mutant wolves. When Shinji notices the wounds on them, he senses that they've been tainted by dark attribute Qi. Yue asks if they should report this, but Shinji suggests they assess the situation first so they can decide how to deploy their people. Before that, Shinji appears to the mutant wolves because he promises Commander Fuwa he won't let these mutants harm civilians. He immediately incinerates them with his lightning energy, so they go through the forest to investigate. When they check further, they notice some signs that people were camping there, but Yuto suddenly pops out behind Shinji to attack him. Yue quickly spots him and creates an ice barrier to protect Shinji. However, Yuto sees that this girl is hot too, just like the last one, so he wonders why hot girls have been hanging around Shinji recently. Eventually, Yuto stops and tells Yue she's pretty, then asks if she'd like to have a drink sometime. However, Yue demands to know who he is and why he attacked Shinji. Yuto explains that he has a beef to settle with Shinji, so he wanted to teach him a little lesson, but Yue asks if he really thought such a weak attack could do anything to Shinji. Eventually, Shinji asks Yuto if he swallowed some sort of elemental energy just to become a cultivator, and Yuto admits that he did, and he's not a full-fledged cultivator. When Shinji realizes he was the one who attacked the wolves earlier, he points out that many people could have died if they had reached the city. However, Yuto says that the lives of weaklings don't concern him since he's already a cultivator. This annoys Yue, so Shinji decides that Yuto only answers to a face full of fists and not talking. This excites Yuto, so he prepares to fight and show Shinji what a real cultivator is. Yuto's body starts to release dark energy, and Shinji detects that he's at around mutation level 2. He's intrigued that just a single fruit can cause such a massive evolution. Immediately, Yuto circles around him and tries to kick him from behind, but Shinji quickly blocks it. Yuto sarcastically praises his skills, but when Shinji asks him if this is his full power, Yuto angrily tells him to die and starts to pummel him. Despite everything, Shinji continues to block all his attacks, much to Yuto's surprise. Eventually, Shinji tells him he's too weak and tells him he's way out of his league. Shinji punches him in the face and knocks him down with one punch, so his friends rush to his side to check if he's fine. When they try to help him, Rin wonders when Shinji got this strong, and she starts to regret breaking up with Shinji earlier. Immediately, Shinji tells Yue to capture the group and investigate if there are others like them, so Yue contacts the chairman to seal off the mountain. Meanwhile, Yuto can't believe that he lost to Shinji, and something suddenly appears to ask him if he's hungry for power. He appears in the throne room of a dark being who asks him if he seeks power, so he confesses that he wants overwhelming power, and he'll pay any price as long as he can crush Shinji. Immediately, the being fires some dark energy into his mind, and Yuto rejoices that this is the overwhelming power he's been longing for. In the real world, Yue notifies the group that they'll act under the orders of the Cultivation Association. Suddenly, Yuto releases an outburst of dark energy that pushes back his friends. Shinji quickly pulls Yue out of harm's way because the dark energy coming from Yuto even destroys the plants around him. It starts to suck the life force out of his friends, and Shinji realizes that the prediction of someone named General Kain is true. A mysterious dark being appears before them who rejoices because it has finally returned to the world that's filled with delicious energy. Meanwhile, Yue realizes that Yuto's power has jumped from Wellspring level 2 to level 4 in a moment, but Shinji warns her to be careful because that thing might no longer be Yuto anymore. Suddenly, the system notifies Shinji that it has detected the Dark Monarch, a primary Dark-type monster. He's assigned an emergency mission to defeat the Dark Monarch with a reward of getting a new spiritual energy attribute slot. Shinji realizes he's not seen a monster like this in his past life, so he doesn't know what kind of attacks it can throw at him. Meanwhile, the monster complained that the weaklings he consumed had poor flesh and blood, so he couldn't manifest himself completely. However, the Dark Monarch senses that Shinji and Yue have strong chi in their body, and he can completely recover his power if he takes them. He decides to take Yue since she looks weaker, so he launches a dark arrow at her, but Shinji quickly disperses it with a thunder flame. This amuses the Dark Monarch, and he considers that Shinji was able to block his attack by luck. Eventually, Shinji asks the being what he is and where Yuto is. The monster tells him that it's far too soon for him to know who he is, but he tells him that he has to submit to him or choose death. When Shinji realizes that talking won't solve this, the monster finds it amusing that a human wants to reason with him, so he decides to give him a demonstration of the terror of ultimate darkness. The Dark Monarch releases a dark cloud that overwhelms Shinji, so Yue rushes forward to blast the dark cloud with her ice powers. The attack doesn't work, so the monster tells her that a mere attack of that level won't break this, and tells them to stop resisting their fate. However, Shinji suddenly forces his hand out of the cloud and he slices the whole thing to bits, much to the monster's shock. When he's free, Shinji asks the monster if this is truly its full power. This annoys the Dark Monarch, so he calls him a foolish brat and asks if he really thinks he can stand him just because he broke the seal on the Dark Void. Yue also offers to fight with Shinji, but he tells her to stay where she is because he thinks this is a good chance to test his full power. She asks him what he means, so he releases a thunder flame shield around himself and rushes to grab the monster's face. With one move, he pours out a blast of thunder flames that covers up the Dark Monarch and throws him backward a few feet into an explosion. After being wedged into a rock, the Dark Monarch can't believe he just got thrown back by a weakling human. Shinji asks him if he's scared, and the monster angrily rushes at him to kill him for looking down on him. When he gets close, he fires a dark wave at Shinji to kill him, but our boy stops the attack mid-air. The Dark Monarch can't believe that this guy blocked his attack with one hand and didn't even take any damage, so he realizes this isn't a game. Shinji eventually asks him if he's finally starting to feel afraid, and he says it's a disappointment that he wouldn't even have to go all out to take him down. When the Dark Monarch realizes this guy isn't ordinary and he's stronger than he is, he runs away so he doesn't get killed here. He plans to devour more humans and get stronger so he can come back for revenge. However, Shinji isn't planning to let him escape, so he strikes him with lightning, rocking the monster to its core. The attack causes the Dark Monarch to explode, but a bat emerges from him and flies away. Shinji soon realizes the Dark Monarch discarded most of his body just so he could survive. When Shinji returns, Yue asks him if he's okay, but he tells her to call the chairman immediately because part of that monster got away. Later that day, a public announcement is made that the weather is going to worsen severely that afternoon, and the people are advised to stay indoors to avoid a major disaster. On the streets, some girl blames someone for all this, and they wonder why it has to rain today when she's supposed to hang out. Someone suddenly asks her who she's referring to, and she's suddenly ambushed by the dark bat. Before the bat can touch the girl, Shinji slams him with a face full of lightning, and he asks the girl why she's out when the news advised otherwise. Several other dark bats appear in the sky, so he tells her to hurry home till the sky clears because it's dangerous to be outside. Seeing Shinji standing on a truck, the girl becomes mesmerized because of how cool he is, but Shinji ignores her and picks up a call from Yue. She explains that the dark attribute creature that escaped is more troublesome than expected because it split itself into countless bats and has started attacking civilians. The bats keep evolving by absorbing the spiritual energy inside humans, and the bats seem to be at level 2 now and they keep feeding. Shinji realizes that the bats plan to use the people of the city as fuel for their evolution, and they're going to have a problem if they reach level 3 and revive the Dark Monarch. Meanwhile, the Dark Monarch thinks about swallowing every human in the city so he can restore his full power. After that, he plans to return to torture Shinji before finally killing him. Sometime later, military officers are mobilized to deal with the bat issue. On online forums, people keep crying for help because of the bats moving around. Meanwhile, Natsuki and her team move quickly to take down these comments because people don't just stay at home, and they keep making posts that spread fear. She wonders why they're so stubborn and considers just cutting off the internet because it's going to be hard to stop this spread of information that's going around to millions of people. However, Tokido reminds her that cutting off the internet would throw people into public panic and cause more disaster, so she tells him she was just speaking rhetorically. She asks him if the military has been deployed yet, since it's been 30 minutes. So he tells her all the roads leading to Amami City have been blocked by level 3 bats, and it'd be impossible to break through. Natsuki thinks about Shinji again and hopes he's safe. Meanwhile, Shinji and Yue return to headquarters, and he confirms that his team is safe. Apparently, Mika and Kaori were training when they got called in, but Ken and his brother were attacked by a bat, though he drove it off and cheerfully roasted it. Eventually, they're summoned to a meeting with the chairman, where they're supposed to speak with the military. The chairman signals Commander Fuwa that they're ready, so Commander Fuwa brings up the matter of the Amami City rescue operation. He explains that all the main roads leading to the city have been blocked by bats. There's also a huge energy reading at a certain civic hall in the southeast area of Amami City, and they suspect the main bat controlling the mutants is there. Kaori appears shaken by the information, and Ken notices that. Eventually, the commander explains that the plan is to force entry from the East Highway, create an evacuation route for the citizens, and then pour in heavy bombs to suppress the area. To evacuate the citizens quickly, Fuwa wants the Cultivators Association to take a separate route and head to the Civic Hall to assist. They calculate that the operation must be completed within 50 minutes, so the creature in the Civic Hall doesn't complete its evolution and become something that can't be handled. When the commander asks if they have any questions, Kaori hesitantly asks what will happen if the military fails to reach the Civic Hall in time. So the commander tells her they won't extend the timeline to deploy the bombs, and they'll have to take down the mutant creature within the time limit they have. This shocks Kaori because of the citizens that will be put in danger, but the commander reminds her that the entire country, and not only Amami City, will be at risk if the dark attribute creature completes its evolution. When he tries to ask another question, the commander asks her if she has family in the Civic Hall. So she admits that her family lives in the area right next to the Civic Hall. After a moment of silence and surprise, Mika assures Kaori that she'll ensure her family is saved because Shinji has put her through special training, and her skills have significantly improved. Ken also chimes in and offers to get his brother to pick up her family by car. So the commander tells Kaori that she'll have to sit out this operation because of this. Kaori demands to know why. so Fuwa explains that anyone whose emotions might affect their judgment could affect the mission. Commander Fuwa immediately tells Chairman Yanagi to please revise the personnel assignments for the sake of the mission, and while the chairman is hesitant, Shinji pleads with the commander to wait because there's a critical flaw in his plan. When the commander asks him what he's talking about, Shinji explains that ammunition alone won't deal damage to the monster, and this surprises everyone. The commander asks him how he knows that, so Shinji explains that it's because he already dealt a serious wound to the monster a short while ago. He proposes they abandon the Supreme Commander's plan and go with his own, so the commander asks him what his plan is. Shinji reminds him that he asked him to help procure a weapon a few days ago, so he says he'll use that to slice the monster into pieces. Shortly after, Natsuki and a team of military men appear at the highway entrance of Amami City. Outside a tunnel, Natsuki checks out the energy level with her device and realizes she has to deliver a sword to Shinji to help save the citizens of the city. Over the comms, the commander tells all forces to begin the operation to destroy the creature within the city. They're to start at the highway entrance on the east side of the city and end at the Amami City Civic Hall. Apparently, the objective is to deliver the sword to the Civic Hall, and 5 platoons will be involved in carrying out the mission. They soon run into the tunnel guns blazing and start shooting down bats, but some of the men are injured by the bats. Natsuki signals that they follow her, and she's hell-bent on getting them out of there alive. Meanwhile, Shinji vaporizes several bats using lightning energy, and he wishes he had just held the monster back in the forest, so it wouldn't turn into so much of a hassle. Behind him, Mika and Yue rush in to deal with the rest of the bats with their powers. Yue becomes worried when she sees the number of bats flying around, and it's clear they keep duplicating themselves as they absorb spiritual energy. The number of bats seems ridiculously high, and they're worried they'll create a monster that's too strong if they merge. However, Shinji assures them that they couldn't beat him in the forest, and won't be able to do so now. He also tells them their priority is to meet with Natsuki in the Civic Hall. Meanwhile, Natsuki and some of her team members are able to make it out of the tunnel even though they're battered. When they get out, Yuto appears among the bats, and he tells Natsuki that she's his own and calls her gorgeous. Natsuki is surprised to find out he's the one who has caused this great destruction in the city, but he tells her he doesn't care about taking out the trash of this world. This annoys Natsuki, so she comes close to kicking him in the face, but the kick doesn't affect him at all. This surprises Natsuki, but Yuto tells her that seeing cultivators like them is like offering him a feast. Apparently, he'd have only been able to recover half his peak strength after consuming all of the city, but now he'll be able to get his entire strength because he'll be able to consume them too. The Dark Monarch speaks from Yuto's body and tells her that they'll all become his nourishment like Yuto has become. When the Monarch covers Natsuki in his dark energy, he's suddenly attacked with ice, forcing him to let go of her. It turns out to be Tokido, who tells the Monarch that he's going to die here. Meanwhile, the Dark Monarch senses that Tokido has already reached level 5, and he's excited that he'll surpass his peak and achieve a greater evolution if he devours this guy. However, Tokido tells Natsuki to hurry to meet Shinji while he tries to handle things over here. She quickly leaves with the rest of her men but warns him to be careful. The Dark Monarch tries to stop her from escaping, but Tokido blocks the path of his dark energy with a wall of ice. Natsuki and her men go through the bats, guns blazing, but they keep attacking the men ferociously. When they run into one of the evolved bats, Natsuki realizes that normal ammunition won't work on them, and as some of her men are taken down, she hopes they'll be able to deliver the weapon. She starts to wonder if Shinji will also make it to the drop-off point, but she quickly snaps out of it and continues. As she's moving, a bat closes in on her from behind, but it's soon turned into roast when Shinji finds her. Natsuki is glad to see him, so Shinji pats her head to show that there's no need to worry anymore. She quickly shows him the weapon she received from her grandfather, and when he brings it out, Natsuki wonders how strong the sword is. To demonstrate, Shinji tells Kawasaki and his men to step aside so they give him space to act, and he imbues his Thunderflame into his sword. Once he does that, he uses a move called Cross Slash, which tears down all the bats above them in an instant. The other soldiers can't believe their eyes, but Kawasaki expects nothing less from his friend. Natsuki finds Shinji amazing and tells him to teach her the technique too. He agrees, but tells her she'll need to train her chi to at least level 4 first. Eventually, Shinji confirms that only these soldiers were able to break through the bats, and everyone else became casualties. Natsuki affirms his suspicion and adds that Tokido is currently fighting with Yuto, so she asks him to go help. However, Shinji finds it amazing that Yuto wasn't swallowed by the dark monster, and he wonders if he has revived again. Meanwhile, Tokido keeps fighting with the monster, who taunts him by asking if he's not running out of spiritual energy. Even though Tokido takes down the bats, the Dark Monarch tells him that the bats will keep multiplying forever. In fact, Tokido notices the bats ignoring their comrades that he took down with the ice, but only absorbing their spiritual energy so they can carry on. He realizes that some of them have even evolved to level 3, so he creates an ice shield for the next batch that comes to attack him. The bats continue beating at his wall until they smash through it and get to him, much to his surprise. He's forced to move backward after being injured by one of the bats, and he realizes things are going to get awry. When the Dark Monarch notices him moving backward, he asks him if he's scared, but Tokido fires an ice thorn to pierce him. The monarch is unfazed and swallows the ice thorn with his dark energy. This surprises Tokido, but the guy explains that he was waiting for Tokido to pull out his trump card, so he gladly waited to swallow the massive spiritual energy. Tokido realizes the guy has used his spiritual energy to level up to his prime, so the Dark Monarch decides to return the favor. The Dark Monarch fires dark energy at Tokido, who just stands there in the line of attack and tells Natsuki that he's sorry from afar. Before the dark energy can get to him, Shinji jumps in front of him to take the attack. Tokido warns him to get out of the way because the strike is a full-force strike at the Yonquan level 4, and he won't be able to take it, but Shinji just knocks it off with one hand filled with thunder flame. This shocks Tokido, so he later asks if the young lady is safe, and Shinji tells him she's busy taking down bats. Shinji asks him to join them too and says he'll regroup once he's done taking down this guy. After Tokido leaves, Shinji asks the Dark Monarch if he'll mind sharing who he is before he kills him. The monarch asks Shinji what he's saying and says he's Yuto, but Shinji tells him he'll just kill him since he's not being truthful. Shinji tells him there's no need to be scared because it'll be done in an instant. However, the Dark Monarch asks him if he really thinks he's still at the same level he was back in the forest, and he promises to show him the true strength of his peak. The monarch blasts him with a strong strike, but Shinji doesn't flinch and asks him if this is all of it. With one strike of his sword, Shinji strikes through the attack and almost nicks the monarch, who quickly transforms into several bats to escape the attack. Shinji asks him if this is all he's got, and the others wonder why the bats are suddenly dispersed into the air. Yue asks Mika if she also feels the energy coming from the black cloud, and it seems the bats have received an order to gather towards the black cloud. Meanwhile, Natsuki notices some readings from her device that are too high, and she says that the readings hint that the thing in the sky matches the level of a super mutant. This is shocking because abnormal tracking level refers to minor mutated monsters with the lowest threat level and can usually be handled by non-practitioners. Caution level refers to monsters that pose a mild threat to civilians and are usually handled by low-ranked cultivators. High danger level monsters are those with a certain degree of destructive power that can affect towns and are handled by mid-level cultivators. However, super mutant level refers to monsters of the highest danger level. Due to their advanced destructive capability, they can destroy a small city easily, and it requires top-level cultivators or many cultivators at once. Another level is the panic level, which refers to monsters that can cause disasters for entire nations, and very few cultivators can handle this level. The final level is the world annihilation level, which refers to monsters that put the entire Earth at risk and can only be handled by top-level cultivators, and the World Alliance must pull in all forces to counter it. Regardless of this, Natsuki says to herself that Shinji will return alive. She tells Yue to contact Chairman Yanagi and request reinforcements, and she says she'll also request backup because they can't let Shinji face that monster alone. In the military base, they realize they're unable to reach the second squad, so they wonder if the bats are capable of blocking communications. Meanwhile, Supreme Commander Fuwa wonders if Natsuki and the others managed to break through. On the screens, they suddenly notice the bats gathering in one location, and when they eventually restore communications with a certain Tomita, the leader of the second squad, they ask him what's going on. Captain Tomita tells them they encountered a massive swarm of bats believed to be level 2, and they were under attack until the sky started to clear. After getting the same report from both the second and third squads, the commander tells them to tally the death count. Suddenly, the commander is told that he has a call from Natsuki, and before he can ask about her situation, she tells him a super mutant-level monster is about to appear. This shocks the men, so Commander Fuwa asks her if she understands what she's really saying. She admits that she does because the bats disappeared at once to pour the spiritual energy they absorbed into the super mutant at the center of the black cloud. When one of the soldiers hears that, he concludes that things are over for Amami and everyone else, because only a level 5 cultivator or higher can handle that. When the commander hears that, he becomes distressed and apologizes to Natsuki because there's no other choice. Natsuki tells him she understands, so the commander notifies all units to begin preparing the weapons for mass destruction because they have to stop the monster at all costs. He insists that he won't let the damage spread to other cities. One of the men tries to ask him to calm down first and save Lady Natsuki, but the commander tells him they're soldiers, and the safety of the citizens comes first. As the commander moves to deploy the bombs, Shinji speaks through the comms and the commander is surprised he's alive. Shinji tells him there's no need to drop bombs because he'll take down the creature even though it's a super mutant, which shocks the soldiers. When they start to panic, Shinji tells them not to panic because he has a reason for what he's saying. Shinji asks the commander to cooperate with what he's about to suggest if he wants to save Amami City and his granddaughter. After a moment of hesitation, the commander asks him what he wants them to do, so Shinji asks that he get the military to cover all the costs of everything broken in this battle. Meanwhile, the Dark Monarch concludes his evolution. The Dark Monarch rejoices because he's been able to resurrect, and he's evolved to the peak of level 5, and he can feel the invincibility. He tells Shinji that he'll regret not killing him in the forest, but Shinji doesn't look fazed. The Monarch releases a huge bat in a move called the Giant Shadow Net, and while he gloats about his technique, he sees something that shocks him as well as the officers in the military base. In a short moment, Shinji splits the bat in half with a strike of lightning, and those in the base wonder if he just used a legendary lightning attribute. This shocks everyone, including the commander, who realizes Shinji has surpassed expectations. Meanwhile, the military continues to load the people onto buses to evacuate them. When the people notice the huge burst of lightning, they wonder if it's a cultivator's power, and they can't believe that there's a human who can wield this amount of power. Somewhere else, Mika also sees the display and tells Yue that this is probably Shinji's power. Yue realizes that Shinji is hiding his terrifying power. She had initially thought she could match up with him if she reached level 4, but she realized she was wrong. Nearby, Natsuki is in awe because Shinji is really the man she believed in. On the battlefield, Shinji tells the Dark Monarch that it's his turn. Before he can act, the Monarch blasts him with some dark energy, but Shinji blocks it with his sword and releases a technique called the Mountain River Slash. A huge slash appears that almost overshadows the Dark Monarch. The Monarch creates a shield to block the attack, but his shield is easily broken and he gets a face full of destructive energy. After being hit, the Monarch realizes this isn't a game, so he releases dark tentacles to quickly subdue Shinji. However, Shinji moves really fast and dodges all of them, easily making his way towards the Monarch. Angry, the Monarch insists that he would have killed him already if it were not for the stupid sword. Intrigued, Shinji offers to fight without the sword, so he sheathes the sword. The Monarch quickly takes the opportunity to blast him with some dark energy, but it just hits Shinji's head and bounces off. The Monarch almost goes stark raving mad because his attack was a level 5 peak full strike, and this guy deflected it without a scratch. He wonders if this guy has reached level 6 or higher, but Shinji tells him his life is going to end here if that was his full power. Shinji brings out his sword to finish him, but the Dark Monarch panics because he can't die in a place like this, because he's supposed to absorb more and grow stronger. He decides that he needs to evolve to level 6 or 7 to get his revenge, so he turns around to escape, but Shinji promises not to let him escape again. He uses a technique called Downward Slash and lands it on the monster's back, tearing a hole in its chest. The energy is so strong that it destroys the monster into bits despite its protests. When the monster explodes, the entire base rejoices because they were able to defeat the supermutated monster, and they rejoice that Shinji's lightning is hope for humanity. Immediately, the commander deploys them to rescue the injured. A few days later, Chairman Yanagi thanks Shinji for saving the city, so he asks him if he wants anything because the military and the organization would like to offer him a reward. Shinji tells him he has one important request, and when he's asked what it is, he points at the ladies and asks if they can be asked to leave since this is his house. He laments that they've been here for the past few days, and it's disrupting his daily life. He also adds that Mika's also starting to act weird thanks to the other two. After giving it some thought, the chairman realizes that Yue and Natsuki definitely won't leave him, but maybe Mika would. However, he soon concludes that Shinji is subtly asking for a bigger house, so he quickly tells him to leave everything to him, and Shinji is relieved. Sometime later, important leaders like the commander and the chairman have a meeting to discuss their plans to prepare some kind of reward to honor Shinji for the success of the last operation. Someone offers to give him some spiritual energy resource to elevate him to one of their nation's super cultivators, like the heroes of the Western countries, and another person also suggests turning him into an influencer online to boost his popularity. While they talk about that, another person suggests assigning him to a senior military role and having him lead and train their military cultivators moving forward. When the Supreme Commander asks for other opinions, someone else steps in and says he's opposed to all this. Someone refers to this new guy as General Gento, and all wonder what he's doing here. Gento speaks to the Supreme Commander and mentions that he overheard something about rewarding some kid. The commander asks him what he means by that, so Gento says he doesn't see the need to reward some brat just because he got lucky and beat a monster. However, the others tell Gento he's going too far because what Shinji did was more than mere luck, but Gento tells them to keep quiet. However, the commander steps in and tells Gento that defeating a level 5 monster isn't something luck alone can accomplish. Despite Gento's doubts, Commander Fua tells him that the decision on whether to reward Shinji is not his to make. Eventually, Gento takes his seat and says he has nothing more to say if they're so obsessed with the reward. They soon proceed with the meeting, so the commander asks if anyone else has anything else to say. Yanagi tells them that Shinji didn't help out for fame or title, so he doubts he needs any of that. The commander asks Yanagi if he has any ideas, so Yanagi decides this is his time to shine because he's the one who has built a personal relationship with Shinji. He tells them he asked Shinji what he wanted a few days ago, and his answer was quite clear. When asked what he said, he narrates everything that Shinji said and concludes that Shinji wants a bigger house where he can live together with Yua and the others without feeling cramped. The other officers are shocked and pleased because this didn't occur to them, but the commander realizes that Shinji probably wants the ladies to leave completely, but he decides to let it slide since he knows Natsuki seems interested in Shinji. Eventually, he asks them if they know any suitable property in Tenkai City, so Gento suggests that he has the perfect place in mind. The commander wonders why Gento had a sudden change of heart, but he asks him where that is, and Gento mentions a villa area of Ryokuyoko, located in the Kaio district, Asakai City. This shocks the others because Asakai City is supposed to be sealed off, and one person mentions that they've learned that the mutated creatures in Asakai City have reached level 6. Suddenly, Chairman Yanagi asks Gento why he's giving Shinji such a troublesome suggestion since the Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association has never done anything to him. He reminds him that they want to reward him and not assign a new mission to him. However, Gento explains that he doesn't think the boy deserves such a reward if he can't handle that area on his own. Eventually, the Supreme Commander asks Gento if he's saying he has objections to his decisions, so Gento says he doesn't, but he just wants to personally gauge how strong this so-called hero is. The next day, Yanagi apologizes to Shinji as he hands him the documents to the new villa in Ryokuyoko. Shinji is shocked when he sees they're transferring ownership to him, and he can't believe they're just giving it to him since the property is worth at least several hundred million yen. Yanagi quickly offers to find another reward if he doesn't like it, but Shinji takes back the paper quickly and tells him there's no way he'd turn down a property worth several hundred million yen. Eventually, Yanagi informs him that a level 6 mutated creature appeared in Asakai City and has its nest near the villa, so the military is hoping that he could lead a squad to overtake it. However, Shinji says he doesn't need a squad and he'll handle it alone. That makes Yanagi worried, so he reminds him that the last monster was a level 5, and this one is a level 6, so there's no way he can handle this, no matter how strong he is. Yanagi reminds him that the gap between level 5 and 6 is significant, and it's not something that can be easily overcome. So Yanagi suggests he keep training to surpass the level since he's still young, but Shinji tells him he's already at level 7, leaving the commander shocked. Sometime later, a soldier asks General Gento if Shinji really said he would cooperate. He's saying this because Green Sun Lake is a place they've not been able to subdue even after half a month, and it's not something a mere 20-year-old like Shinji can handle. Regardless, Gento says they'll find out soon because if he's not capable, he won't be coming back alive. The soldier agrees that Shinji probably only won the last monster by luck, and Gento adds that a young man like Shinji needs some education from veterans like them. From behind the vehicle, a hot office lady tells General Gento not to let personal feelings interfere and cause the mission to fail because they must succeed for the sake of Asakai City. But he tells her she doesn't need to tell him that. When they get to the villa, the lady steps out and greets Shinji, introducing herself as Tawako Sugita, the secretary to the mayor of Asakai City. She introduces the others as General Gento, the leader of Asakai City's mutant extermination operation, and Lieutenant Tsuji. Eventually, Gento asks him if he's the one who defeated the level 5 wellspring monster in Tenkai City, so Shinji tells him he is, and asks if there's a problem. Gento says there isn't, but he just expected someone who looked tough like their squad members, and he's surprised to see a scrawny guy. This amuses Shinji, so he asks Gento if he thinks looking tough like him would make monsters go easy on him. This annoys Tsuji, but Gento tells Shinji that he won't make it out of Green Sun Lake alive if he's all talk and asks if he's ready for that. However, Shinji tells him not to worry because he wouldn't force him to come along if he were afraid of dying. Eventually, Sugita stops their headbutting and tells them to cooperate for the sake of the mission. No one responds, so she proceeds to explain the mission. Apparently, after the Earth's spiritual energy got restored, dark elemental energy suddenly appeared in this place and unidentified creatures occupied the estate. According to their radar scans, the mutants inside are at Wellspring Level 5. The last operation by the military resulted in 68 civilian casualties, but they finally managed to seal the monsters inside the estate. Once the briefing is over, Shinji turns to enter the estate, and Tsuji asks the general if this guy is really just going to charge in without forming a strategy. The general is also surprised, but he follows him because they can't leave him alone. Once they're inside the perimeter, Shinji opens his system and recalls that he used his last mission reward to unlock a new elemental slot. He wonders if he should consider the dark element or the light element. Because he wasn't this strong in his past life, he doesn't have the full details about how each of them works. However, to prevent tragedies like what happened to Yue, he decides to go with the light element since it would have healing abilities that would be useful. From behind him, Tsuji demands to know if he has a plan, so Shinji tells him he doesn't have one, but they can't make a plan without seeing the target first. Tsuji becomes angry, but their conversation is stopped when a mutated dog charges at them. The general quickly slams into the monster's face and knocks it backward. Tsuji is perplexed by the fact that a monster that's stronger than him would show up before they even enter the estate, and he wonders what they'll meet inside. However, the general tells the others to get into action because this mutated dog is at least a Wellspring level 4. He rushes in with fists full of fire to land hits on the monster. And Tsuji is impressed because it's expected that the general can hold his own against a level 4 mutant hound.
Gento kicks the monster in the face, causing it to bleed, but Shinji just asks if they can go inside now. Tsuji wonders what he's saying since they're dealing with a level 4 monster up front, but Shinji just swings his sword and cuts the monster in half in an instant. Gento can't believe his eyes, so Shinji tells them to take their time while he heads in. For a moment, Gento just stands there and wonders if this guy's the real deal for him to be able to do this. Immediately, Tsuji tells the general that they seem to have pissed off a dangerous person, and the general agrees that they need to apologize to him immediately. When Shinji opens the door, he notices that something feels off because he can't find the bodies of the 68 people who died. When the others follow him, Shinji asks General Gento if his military unit recovered any of the corpses, so Gento tells him they didn't because they were too focused on pushing the monsters inside the estate. Gento asks him why he's asking, so Shinji explains that the mutant inside the estate might be well above Wellspring 5 if their story is true. General Gento asks if he's saying the monsters have eaten the corpses, so Shinji explains that mutant creatures prefer absorbing spiritual energy and they're not after physical bodies. Regardless, he advises that they remain cautious. Shinji suggests they split up and asks who'd like to go to the second floor, so Gento says they'll follow his orders. Because of that, Shinji chooses to go to the second floor, and he asks them to handle the basement. Shinji makes his way to the second floor, and he finds it strange that he doesn't even see the bones of the corpses. He eventually tries to use the light attribute he obtained earlier, and when he does that, he senses a trail of dark energy. Meanwhile, Gento and Tsuji look through the basement, and Tsuji points out that something feels off. The general tells him to proceed carefully and be alert. Suddenly, a monster jumps over their head and lands in front of them. They both jump at the monster to attack it together, but the monster releases 3 phantom slashes in their direction. Although the general is able to stop it with a fire attack, his hands start to tremble because the monster is too powerful. However, Tsuji closes in on the monster and tries to punch it using a move called the Phoenix-style combat Sangan Fist. When he lands his punch, he's unable to break through, so he wonders how thick the monster's skin is. The monster soon turns towards him to rip him to shreds, but the general runs in to help so that Tsuji isn't harmed. However, the general is soon knocked back by the monster's tail, and he gracefully cracks some planks with his back. This annoys Tsuji that the monster would dare attack his general, so he jumps in for another punch to retaliate. The general tries to call out to Tsuji not to fight without thinking, but a lightning strike soon appears from above and incinerates the monster. Tsuji is shocked, so Shinji tells him that he took some time dealing with a single dog. The general is surprised that Shinji was able to kill the monster in one strike, so he asks him how powerful he is, but Shinji asks him what he's talking about since the final boss hasn't even appeared. General Gento asks if this wasn't the monster nesting in Ryokuyoko Lake Villa, but Shinji explains that this was just an avatar. Because it'll be a problem to explain, he decides to show them the real world directly, and he activates his light energy. The light is quite blinding to the others, but they soon see similar monsters feeding on the dead bodies of men around them. The general is shocked, and he realizes they were cooking because there are many more of the dogs, and they were just struggling with one. Tsuji starts to sweat bullets, and he asks why there are so many. Shinji asks him why he's surprised since it's normal for there to be this many, as it's a monster's nest. Immediately, Gento suggests they retreat and call for reinforcements because they can't move forward without the help of the military to wipe out these monsters. However, Shinji refuses to call in the military because the villa is his reward, and he won't have any place to live if this place gets burned down. He explains that it's not so hard to deal with these weaklings, so he brings out his sword and does a single strike to finish them off. With a slash of his sword, he releases a whirlpool of energy around them. Shinji uses the Thunderflame Extreme Flash Slash and cuts down all the dogs at once. Gento and Tsuji almost drop their jaws when they realize he just took down those monsters with a single slash. Moments after, Gento adds an honorific to Shinji's name and tells him he's surprised. He admits he thought he was going to die here, but he didn't know Shinji could take them down in one strike. However, Shinji tells him they haven't defeated all the monsters lurking in the villa since those were just small fry. The general almost loses his mind and wonders how he could call those monsters small fry, because that means they're useless, since they struggled so much to win against them. Eventually, Gento tells Shinji that it's not possible since last month's military survey showed that the strongest signal there was only Wakusen level 5. So Shinji explains that it must mean the monsters have evolved within this past month. That terrifies Tsuji, who asks if they even stand a chance against them. So Shinji tells him they'll be fine as long as they stick close. When they gladly agree, Shinji suggests they head in and destroy a few more monsters with a few slashes on their way inside. Gento watches from behind as he beholds the awesome power of a cultivator. Tsuji also watches from behind and worries that they're starting to become like dead weight to Shinji. Gento realizes that they've already cleared the first floor of monsters in less than 10 minutes. Meanwhile, as Shinji is taking down monsters, he senses a strong presence coming from the backyard. He moves towards the backyard and tells the others to carefully follow him. He rushes to the backyard and is surprised by what he sees. He sees a giant red creature floating above the water with dark energy tentacles sticking out of it. He concludes that this must be the final boss of the villa area, so he charges himself up to deal with it. Tsuji tries to call out to Shinji, but Gento stops him so that he doesn't stop Shinji from concentrating his power. Tsuji wonders what Shinji is planning to gather such immense power, so Gento tells him he's seen something like this before. Apparently he saw this with the president of the Asakai City Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association, a powerful warrior at Wakusen level 6, whose name is Kenmochi. As Shinji gathers his power, a monstrous hand comes out of the red blob, so Shinji quickly fires a strike called the Tsukuban Vein Release. However, the strike only destroys the outer layer, and the real monster forces itself out of the cocoon. The others can't believe this because they've never seen such a powerful monster, but Shinji is glad he's finally facing something with a bit of strength. The monster immediately fires dark energy at Shinji, but he jumps out of the way. Next, the monster coughs out dark energy from its mouth, but Shinji sees this as an opening to release a radiant whirlwind with his light energy. The whirlwind hits the creature in the chest, causing the other men to celebrate. As the bird turns around, Shinji jumps after it so it doesn't escape. Then he faces it head-on while protecting himself with a light and lightning barrier. He clashes with the bird using a move called One Blade Across Mountains and Rivers, and the attack launches the bird to the ground. Before it can recuperate, Shinji uses a cross-slash move and destroys the monster further. Meanwhile, the others keep celebrating Shinji's incredible power. Eventually, Shinji closes in on the bird and tells it that this villa belongs to him. With the birds back to the ground, Shinji proceeds to give it a one-way ticket to the afterlife. As he's about to hit the monster, an attack of green light tears through the monster's body, so Shinji quickly jumps out of the line of attack. With the monster taken out, Gento celebrates Shinji's success, but Shinji explains that someone else other than him did that. He tells the person to come out because he's already noticed the flow of his spiritual energy. Suddenly, another guy appears and asks Shinji if there's really a need to kill the monster since he's already won. However, Gento recognizes this man as the famous Kenmochi, so he asks him why he's here. Shinji asks Gento if he knows this guy, so Gento introduces him as the president of the Asakai City Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association and a powerful warrior at Wakusen level 6. Gento introduces Shinji as a genius cultivator from Tenkai City and adds that he came here at the military's request to eliminate this monster's life. So Kenmochi asks Shinji if he could spare this monster's life because he'd like to use it for research. Gento tries to say it's fine, but Shinji says he can't do that because Kenmochi has no right to decide this monster's fate or dictate his choices. Quickly, Gento tries to explain to Shinji that all the military operations in Asakai City were only possible with Kenmochi's support, and Tsuji adds that Kenmochi is a good man who has saved countless soldiers with his light attribute spiritual energy. Eventually, Kenmochi agrees that this monster has killed many people, but it would be better to tame it and make it a friend of humanity rather than just killing it. Kenmochi covers the monster with his light energy, but Shinji releases a lightning strike by his side. Kenmochi is forced to pull back, and when he gets attacked by Shinji's sword slash, Kenmochi blocks the attack with his light energy. Kenmochi destroys the slash attack with his power, but he admits that Shinji is pretty strong. Eventually, he asks Shinji what his actions mean, and asks if he means to fight him or if he wants to become an enemy of humanity. Shinji repeats that this monster has taken far too many human lives and must pay with its own, and secondly, he also doesn't take orders from anyone. More importantly, Shinji mentions that this monster's spiritual energy has been behaving abnormally ever since Kenmochi appeared, so he points his sword at Kenmochi. Gento asks Shinji what he means by abnormal spiritual energy, so Shinji explains that the monster is more afraid of Kenmochi, who is trying to save it, than him, who is trying to kill it. Kenmochi replies that the monster is probably scared because he pinned it down inside a cage of light, so Shinji says he'll confirm that using his special ability to peer into its remaining memories. They all wonder where he got this power, so Shinji explains that he found it by chance while defeating the monsters in Tenkai City. Apparently, he has the ability to read a living creature's brain memories using spiritual energy. As he walks past Kenmochi,
Kenmochi believes that's ridiculous, but Shinji places a hand on the monster and uses his light energy to scan the monster's memories. The light energy overwhelms the monster, but Shinji decides that he needs to go back further because of the method of spiritual energy infusion. Suddenly, Kenmochi becomes uncomfortable and blasts at Shinji, but Shinji gets the info he needs quickly and confirms his suspicions. He fires back at Kenmochi's attack with his sword slash, and it shocks the other men that Kenmochi would attack Shinji. Kenmochi suddenly declares that he'd have to kill Shinji since he's discovered his secret. Shinji asks Kenmochi if he raised the bird-like monster at the villa, so Gento asks him what he's talking about. Tsuji can't believe his ears because he knows that Kenmochi helped the military in their extermination efforts. However, Shinji asks why that monster has survived till now, so Gento replies that it's possibly because they didn't go this deep last time. Shinji asks Gento if he really believes that, so he asks Kenmochi why this monster has been trembling since he arrived, like he's done terrible things to it. Eventually, Kenmochi admits that Shinji is quite sharp, but he adds that intelligent people tend to have short lifespans. This surprises Gento, who asks if what Shinji said is true, so Kenmochi confirms that he raised the monster in this villa. However, he adds that he created it to protect humans and not kill them. This annoys Gento, so he calls Kenmochi a bastard because of their comrades who had to lose their lives to take back Asakai City. Regardless, Kenmochi replies that their deaths were not in vain because he's been able to take the monster to Wakusen level 6 at once because of their sacrifice. It annoys Tsuji that he'd use their men as test subjects, but Kenmochi tells him people like him, who are at the bottom of society, can't understand his reasoning. Kenmochi explains that this monster can be used to eliminate other monsters once fully cultivated, which would reduce the number of soldier casualties. He also explains that they can improve known methods of cultivation by studying the monster's evolution. Kenmochi says the monster is fully under his control, so he proceeds to finish them off because they know too much. He fires light energy at Shinji, but the system asks Shinji if he'd like to absorb the massive light attribute energy. It excites Shinji that he can absorb attacks, so he does that. When the light hits him, the other men rush to help, but Kenmochi paralyzes them with circles of light. Kenmochi prepares to eliminate them, and he enjoys the sounds of their screams as light energy fires through their bodies. Suddenly, Shinji absorbs enough light energy, and he reaches level 2. This makes him happy that he came, so he flies into the air with immense power, shocking Kenmochi. He releases a deadly slash filled with lightning to break the light circles torturing the others, and he asks them to stay put while he finishes this. This shocks Kenmochi, who asks him how he can move freely after being locked inside the light barrier. However, Shinji asks him if he thinks a mere Wakusen level 6 weakling could imprison him, but Shinji thanks him for helping him level up. This annoys Kenmochi, so he prepares another attack to continue the fight. Kenmochi fires the light energy, but Shinji activates a technique that creates a lightning dragon which deflects the light. Kenmochi becomes infuriated, but he doesn't notice when Shinji circles behind him. When he realizes that Shinji is behind him, Kenmochi becomes worried that he's too fast and he can't dodge the attack, and he is brutally injured. When Shinji injures him, he wonders how weak the so-called peak Wakusen level 6 he's heard of is. Kenmochi nurses his deep wound and promises Shinji that he'll kill him. Kenmochi eventually gets back up and starts to radiate bright energy because he's become angry. He tells Shinji he'll show him the true power of a peak level 6, then he creates a massive circle of light. But Shinji tells him he's still nothing to him, even at his full strength. Annoyed, Kenmochi releases multiple attacks called Holy Judgment through the circle of light. However, Shinji dodges them with a slash of his sword. Regardless, Kenmochi charges up his body and circles behind Shinji to pound his skull to dust. Kenmochi uses a long slash of light energy called Flash Blade and brings down a great attack on Shinji. However, he notices that Shinji has disappeared from the spot of the attack, and Shinji tells him he's too slow and slashes him from behind, knocking him to the ground. Further injured, Kenmochi insists that he's not going to lose to Shinji even if it costs him his life. He becomes further infuriated, and he oddly sprouts wings of light. With great force, he flies into the air to use an assault called a bolt assault, which he refers to as his ultimate attack. However, Shinji isn't phased and uses a thunderclap sword style called Supreme Heaven-Earth Rending Slash. Both forces meet mid-air, but Kenmochi is easily overwhelmed by the power. When he falls to the ground, he mentions that it's impossible that Shinji is more powerful than him. Then he asks if his power exceeds the peak of level 6. Shinji tells him peak level 6 is nothing special. It shocks Kenmochi that he's already reached level 7, and he wonders how, since the spiritual energy only recently returned. When he gets tired of the chit-chat, Shinji proceeds to send him to Hades, but Kenmochi starts to tear up because he still has so much to achieve. Shinji doesn't care though, so he takes him out because he knows he won't change. Meanwhile, the other men lose control over their jaws because of how this guy took down Kenmochi with just a few hits. After that, Shinji suggests they go check on the bird, and Gento asks him if they should kill this wicked creature. However, Shinji explains it's not a wicked creature but a victim too. He soon releases his light energy into the bird's body, causing it to reverberate. Shinji tells the bird he won't hurt it, but he wants to help it, and it eventually calms down. After some time, it transforms into an owl, and the other men almost lose their minds. The owl lands on Shinji's shoulder, so Tsuji asks what the heck is going on. Shinji admits that he doesn't know either, but this happened after he tried healing its wounds with light element energy. Confused, Tsuji asks Shinji if he can check the bird's memories to figure out what caused what happened, but Shinji explains that was a lie he used to trick Kenmochi. The men are shocked and say Shinji showed them some sort of vision, so he explains that he only used light energy to project some of his own memories. Eventually, he suggests they head back home so he can do other stuff and repair the villa. Sometime later, the Supreme Commander throws the mission report in the face of a man and asks what kind of management is going on in his Spirit Energy Cultivation Association, especially because a cultivator from the city was raising a monster and using their soldiers as test subjects. The man quickly tries to explain that he had no knowledge of Kenmochi's actions and adds that he was a veteran within the association and one of the top tiers, so they weren't in a position to interfere. Regardless, the commander insists that's what led to this blunder, so the man explains that he's just a civilian and most of the association is managed by the cultivators themselves, so he couldn't interfere. The commander doesn't have that and asks him if he wasn't planning to push the responsibility onto the military. The man pleads that Kenmochi was a level 6 peak cultivator, and a civilian like him couldn't do anything against him or against the military. He pleads with the commander to understand his situation, but the commander reminds him of the number of soldiers who died because of Kenmochi. Immediately, the commander orders that every member of the Spirit Energy Cultivation Association will be interrogated by the military, and they'd have to enforce military law if he refuses. The man quickly agrees to cooperate with the investigation, but pleads that they avoid completely destroying the association's reputation, so he doesn't get killed by the cultivators. Sometime later, Shinji enters his apartment, and Yue asks him if he was hurt while Natsuki welcomes him back. Shinji realizes this is how it feels to have a family, and he kinda likes it, so he decides he'll have to get stronger to protect this kind of life. He eventually replies that the subjugation went fine and he brought back a pet. When they ask what he means, he whistles and the owl lands on his head, and the ladies immediately start gushing at how cute it looks. They start petting it and ask where he got a cute owl from, so he tells them he picked it up from the villa. Yue mentions that it must have a strong will to live to survive in such a place, so Shinji nonchalantly mentions that it was originally a level 6 peak variant beast. The women immediately cringe and ask what he said, and when they try to confirm it, they quickly try to get away from it so it doesn't kill them. However, Shinji tells them there's no need to freak out because it's docile and would have killed them already if it weren't. More importantly, he tells them to worry about their cultivation progress. Yue tells him they're trying, but it's not like they can level up that easily, and Natsuki tells him it's not fair to compare them to a genius like him. However, he tells them to train harder because he might not make it in time to save them next time something happens. Later that evening, some military men talk about Kenmochi's death, and some of them consider it karma. One of them wonders how he died since he was a level 6 peak cultivator, and one of them guesses he might have run into a level 7 variant beast. Someone smacks that guy in the head and explains that there are no level 7 beasts around, and when he asks how the guy died, he's told about the rumor of a powerful cultivator from Tenkai City who killed him, who had also resolved the crisis there before. The others are shocked that Tenkai City has someone that strong, but Gento soon comes in to demand what the commotion is about. They quickly change the topic, but Gento warns them that details about the Tenkai City cultivator are classified military intelligence, and they can't leak it. The next morning, Natsuki reads the news about the mysterious strongest cultivator who recaptured Tenkai City with the military. She reads some comments that praise Shinji, but some people find the story fishy and made up. Some guy says he's a cultivator from Seiku City who's around Spirit Spring level 7, and he plans to participate in a tournament the country is holding to determine the strongest cultivator, and he plans to test Shinji's strength. This comment annoys Natsuki, and when Yue asks, she tells him about the user who calls himself the King of Seiku, who claims he's a Spirit Spring level 7 cultivator who plans to challenge Shinji. However, Yue is surprised because he's not heard about such a tournament, so Natsuki explains that it seems her grandfather issued an order to the military to determine the strongest cultivator through a nationwide tournament. Apparently, they want to use it as a catalyst to encourage cultivators everywhere to train and protect national security. Natsuki pleads with Shinji that he has to win the tournament, but Shinji is busy trying to get the owl to eat the expensive food he just got it. The owl doesn't give a crap about its seed though, so Shinji tells it to go catch small animals itself if that's what it wants to eat. The ladies draw his attention back to the martial arts tournament, but Shinji tells them he's too busy and he's not interested in going. Surprised, they ask what could be more important than this, so he tells them he has to finish the renovation of the villa as quickly as possible. He tells them he plans to move out before they turn his apartment into their hotel. Sometime later, military officials learn that Shinji is not participating, and they learn it's because he's busy with the villa renovation. The head of the cultivators group, Fukuhara, says it's good news because it's less trouble for them, so Commander Fuwa asks him what he means by that. Flustered, Fukuhara explains that fewer participants means less work and hassle, but the commander tells him to watch his mouth. The commander explains that the tournament isn't just for cultivators to compete, but it's to discover new talent. Without a genius like Shinji, he asks how they intend to stand shoulder to shoulder with other nations. Eventually, one of the men reminds the commander that Shinji doesn't care much about honor and all that, so it won't persuade him, but the commander still doesn't agree because it will be a loss to the country. Because of that, one of them suggests offering rare resources as a reward in case that might interest Shinji, but one of them points out that the military only possesses low-level spirit chi mutation zones. Since Shinji is probably around Spirit Spring level 7, things like that probably won't move him. Suddenly, Yanagi suggests something and mentions other dangerous mutation zones besides Green Sun Lake and Asakai City. Since they're gathering strong cultivators, he suggests that they use the opportunity to have them resolve the super mutant level mutation zone in Asakai City. If they succeed, Asakai City's functions will be restored, and it will be a great deed because no country has managed to resolve a super mutant level mutation. Everyone agrees except Fukuhara, who protests that he would have to bear a lot of responsibility if that happens. He suggests they hold it in another city, like the neighboring Seiku City, but the commander tells him to calm down. The commander proposes that the military unite to establish thorough safety measures beforehand so that things won't go wrong. However, Fukuhara says he's sick of hearing about safety measures because the commander always says that, but things always turn into chaos. He begs that they stop it because he just wants to live peacefully into his retirement age. Eventually, the commander tells Fukuhara he's not impressed by how he's handling this, even though he's the chairman of the Asakai City Spirit Chi Cultivation Association. Because of that, Fukuhara concedes and suggests they do it since he knows they won't listen to him. The commander thanks Yanagi for his proposal, but Yanagi is more concerned about how this will help them find information about Yue's parents. That evening, Shinji does some cultivation and power rips through his body until he breaks into Spirit Spring level 9, and he's glad he'll soon reach the Iron Vein realm with one more step. The next morning, Shinji hears a knock on the door, and it turns out to be Miss Sugita, the mayor's assistant, so he asks her if there's something he can help her with. She explains that she came to deliver his reward and to get his signature for his paperwork. When she enters, she shows him the documents of the villa and the documents he has to sign, so they cover the renovation and every other thing. While he signs the papers, she tells him there's one more important matter she'd like to discuss with him. When she says it's about the martial arts tournament, he asks that she give him more details because he didn't really take it seriously when Yue and the others brought it up before. So, she explains that the location is a super mutant level singularity, and it surprises Shinji the amount of danger in one city. Sugita explains that Asakai City is where key lines intersect, and it has had excessive spiritual energy since the energy got restored. So many dangerous singularities have been created. She also adds that it will be good news for all practitioners in their country if Asakai City succeeds in restoring its function. Apparently, the super mutant level singularity, they're going to have extremely pure lightning attribute spiritual energy. That surprises Shinji. And when she gives him the document to read about it, he points out that they've been meticulously preparing for a way to make him participate in the martial arts tournament. She becomes flustered and tells him not to misunderstand, but he tells her it's no big deal and promises to decide after going through the documents. Sugita soon takes her leave and asks him to reach out if he has any other issues. That evening, Shinji gets some takeout and calls the ladies down to come have dinner. They both come out groggily in their nightwear, and they ask him what the documents on the table are. He tells them about the documents for the reward and the info about the tournament. Excited, Natsuki goes through the document to see the reward, but she considers her grandpa stingy when she learns it's just one villa. She says she'll ask her grandpa if he can get them a little more land, but Yue spots a document that catches her attention. She picks it up and realizes it's about the singularity where her parents disappeared, and she goes through the documents. She becomes flustered and wonders if the military is hiding information, and they don't want her to know the truth. Shinji notices that she's seen the paper, and he considers that it may be better for Yue not to get involved in this matter. Later that evening, he goes through one of the reports about the Lightning Labyrinth where search team members named Himi Wataru and Himi Yukina went missing after 4 explorations. Apparently, they searched for 7 days and they lost contact on the 5th day. After that, the daughter of the Himi couple became the adopted daughter of Mr. Yanagi. Immediately, Shinji calls Miss Sugita and says he's participating, and that makes her happy. However, he mentions that he has some complaints about the military's methods. When she asks what he means, he asks if they were counting on the fact that he would be unable to let this go if Yue knew her parents were involved with that specific singularity. But Sugita says that's not their intention, and they may have been a coincidence, but Shinji asks her if she believes that, so she promises him that she will convey his opinions to the higher-ups. Regardless, he tells her to stop diverting responsibility for this and say he has complaints about this whole thing, no matter what the military is plotting. He tells her to tell them this is the first and last time they'll pull such a trick, or he'll change his mind, so she pleads with him and promises that she will relay his words to the higher-ups. When he enters the house, Shinji finds Yue asleep on the couch, so he covers her up and promises he'll find a way to her parents. Sometime later, Shinji is dropped off at the meeting site for the tournament, so men in the military rush to welcome him formally, which shocks him. He quickly pleads with them to stop because he's not used to that kind of reception, but Gento tells him it's the least they can do because he's saved their lives several times over. Regardless, Shinji says it's fine because he only did what he needed to do, but Gento insists that everyone here respects him deeply because of the impact the Kenmochi incident had on the military. One of the men asks Shinji if it's true that he took down Kenmochi with a single blow, so Shinji replies that Kenmochi was a tricky opponent, but he wasn't that strong. This excites the men so that they start to praise him, but he quickly gets uncomfortable, so he tries to disperse them so they leave him alone. In the vehicle, Natsuki tells him to get used to the attention because he'll be facing this plenty of times from now on. But Shinji jokes that he feels like he's turned into some kind of rare collectible. He soon asks Gento if he knows where Chairman Yanagi is because there's something he needs to discuss with him. So Gento leads him to him. Somewhere close by, Yanagi goes through some documents and thinks through how they can vet the participants thoroughly because of the numerous dangers present in this singularity. Shinji soon enters to see him, so Yanagi tells him to have a seat. Shortly after, Shinji mentions that he heard from Miss Sugita that he was the one who chose this singularity, so Yanagi admits that he didn't see any other option, even though he knows Shinji might not be pleased about it. He adds that Yue acts as though everything is normal during the day, but she often cries at night. Apparently, he had hoped to somehow rescue Yue's parents himself before he met Shinji, but on 5 occasions, the units he led failed to produce results and also sustained heavy casualties. He tells Shinji he needs him to participate in the tournament to serve as inspiration to other practitioners and, if possible, find Yue's parents. The chairman also apologizes for forcing this on him, but he pleads that he does not blame Yue for this because she knows nothing about it. Eventually, Shinji asks the chairman to come to him directly next time instead of going through indirect approaches. Confused, the chairman asks him what he means, so Shinji replies that he's friends with Yue, and friends help each other out, so he doesn't need a reason to do this. This surprises the chairman, so he tells Shinji that he owes him one. Sometime later, Gento welcomes a crowd of cultivators to the martial arts tournament, and he tells them he hopes they're able to measure each other's abilities and find motivation for greater discipline. After that, he explains the important points they need to know before entering the singularity. Gento explains that the site for the tournament is a singularity in Asakai City rated as super mutant level, which is extremely dangerous because it lies at the intersection of powerful lines. While Shinji and the ladies listen to the announcement, a random dude introduces himself to Shinji as Shusumida from Fuyutsu City and asks if he's Shinji. Shinji shakes him, and the guy expresses his surprise because he never expected the legendary Sword Saint to be such an approachable person. Shinji becomes confused as to who he's calling Sword Saint, so Shu explains that the title comes from the legend that he defeated Kenmochi in a single strike, and he wonders how Shinji hasn't heard about it. Shinji hopes the guy will stop talking, so he asks him if he needs something. Gladly, the guy asks him if he'd like to stick together once they get inside the singularity, which surprises the ladies. Shinji also asks him why he wants to stick with them and asks if the Fuyutsu City Cultivators Association asked him to do something. Shu pleads with him to keep this between them, but he mentions that he was sent by the Fuyutsu City Spiritual Cultivators Association just to fill a quota, but he doesn't actually have any significant power. That surprises Shinji, so he asks him how he has no significant power since he's a cultivator, and if it's not humiliating to come here, but Shu explains that the folks in charge don't care about stuff like that as long as the list is full. Apparently, they just put in guys like him who aren't cut out for it just to look the part. Shinji finds this interesting, so Shu pleads that he doesn't want to die because the singularity is dangerous even for veterans, and he'll end up dead since he's a novice. He pleads with Shinji to let him stick with him since he's strong, so he'll have a chance of making it out alive. But Natsuki calls him a coward, and adds that it's disgraceful to have such a participant with them. However, Yue tells her not to speak like that, especially when he's right there. Regardless, Natsuki says she'll be the timid one if she doesn't say it to his face. She eventually says it's okay if he agrees not to slow them down, so Shu swears that he won't be a burden and he'll follow all of their orders. Because of that, Mika suggests to Shinji that they should let him tag along, and Yue points out that the guy doesn't seem to be plotting anything. Eventually, Shinji permits him to follow them as long as he doesn't act selfishly or recklessly. While they're talking, Gento announces that the first annual martial arts tournament commences. A portal is opened in the air, and the cultivators are released to the arid region where the tournament will be held. Natsuki mentions that she thought Asakai City was a major city, so she wonders if it looks like this because of the super mutant singularity, so Yue confirms that the mutant beasts there seem to have altered it because they prefer this type of environment. Suddenly, everything starts to shake, much to their surprise. So Shinji tells them to stay on guard because anything can happen. Out of the ground, mutant beasts rise and rush towards them, so Shinji tells them to get ready for battle. Out of nowhere, the beasts are hit with an attack called Flame Illusion, and the person who fired it asks our MC if he's Shinji. Shinji asks him who he is, so he introduces himself as Ku Hozumi, the strongest cultivator in Seiko City, and he adds that he left him a message on the boards a few days ago. Natsuki remembers reading the message with the name King of Seiko, so Ku tells Shinji that he came here to challenge him. Shinji immediately turns away from him and explains that he doesn't have time to entertain him right now, so he asks him to leave if that's the pointless reason with which he came. Ku replies that it's disappointing and says that the story of him finishing Kenmochi in a single strike was just a story. So he tells Shinji to polish his skills more and challenge him when he's ready. This annoys Natsuki, so she tells Ku she'll take him on instead since he has a loud mouth, but Shinji tells her she doesn't need to engage him since he's not their priority right now. Shinji suggests they focus on heading towards the mountain up ahead, and he hopes that Yue's parents are alright. While they're flying, Shinji notices that something is off nearby, so they jump down to check it out. Underneath, they find an entrance into a cave, and Yue notices signs of a fight, which looks like the work of a fire element mutant beast. Shinji suggests they take a look, so they go in deeper. They soon run into a shocking sight of some cultivators battling a huge fire monster. The monster brutally injures several of them and starts to burn a few more with lava. While they cry for help, they notice Shinji, and the men start to rejoice because Shinji will save them. However, Shinji notices the monster is a level 4 spirit beast, so he considers that it will be a good test for Yue and Mika. He immediately asks them if they can handle the monster since they both specialize in ice techniques, and they agree. Both ladies launch towards the monster, and Mika almost gets blasted by the monster's fire breath, but she creates an ice barrier to protect herself. While she distracts the monster, Yue creates an ice thorn sting and fires it at the monster's leg, causing it to roar in pain. Before the monster can respond, she uses a frozen flight formation technique to double slash the monster in the chest. With the monster writhing in pain, Mika takes the chance to create an ice spear, which she drives through the monster's stomach, causing its body to shatter into pieces. Meanwhile, the men watch as the girls fight, and it excites them so much that one guy says it's like watching goddesses descend. When the girls come down, the men surround them to praise them, and Shinji considers that it's good that the others get some recognition too. However, he notices a fire element crystal drop from that monster, and he considers that Natsuki can power up even more with it. As he's about to pick up the crystal, someone tells him the crystal belongs to him. It turns out to be Ku, but Ku tells him to hand over the crystal or he'll show no mercy. However, the others ask him who he thinks he is to hide while they were fighting, only to show up when he spotted the crystal. However, Ku calls them grunts and tells them to shut up, so he releases a flame slash to silence them. The men quickly dodge so they're not burnt, and when they see the extent of the destruction, they realize they're completely outmatched. Ku tells them only those prepared to die should step forward, and when they all hesitate, he starts to laugh because he expected them to put up more of a fight. Ku insists that the crystal belongs to him and asks if any of them has an objection, so Shinji says he has an objection. Ku asks him what he said and asks him how he has the nerve to talk to him when he was shaking in his boots earlier. Shinji tells him he was trying to avoid conflict, but he's going to get it if he insists. Shinji immediately rushes toward him with his Thunderflame sword and uses a move called the Flame Emperor Fist to punch a hole in Ku's chest. Ku falls to the ground, and the men are shocked that this happened in a single strike. However, this annoys Ku, and he promises to kill Shinji, so he activates his firepower and starts to power up. Because of the extent of his power-up, one of the men figures that he must have powered up using the fire element spiritual energy that the cave is filled with. That would mean he's practically invincible as long as he's inside the cave. So Shu starts to get worried for Shinji, but Natsuki assures him that no one has been able to defeat Shinji. Ku eventually tells Shinji that he's practically a god in this place since it's overflowing with fire element spiritual energy, but Shinji asks him if he dares act so high and mighty just because he's reached the peak of Spirit Spring level 7. This annoys Ku, so he rushes at Shinji with a fierce attack to kill him, but Shinji doesn't move out of the way and calls him weak. In an instant, Shinji uses a lightning flame slash and cuts through Ku's attack, cutting one of his hands off. Ku is knocked to the ground and starts to scream because of his arm, but Shinji tells him that's what he gets for swinging his sword recklessly and asks him if he really thinks a nobody like him can defeat him. Shinji warns that he'll spare his life today out of consideration for the military's reputation, but he promises him he'll get no mercy next time. Ku immediately admits he's wrong and swears to never speak to him like that. However, in his mind, he promises to pay him back for this humiliation. Meanwhile, the others are shocked that he could take down Ku in one move, even though Ku is at the peak of Spirit Spring, level 7. The team soon comes to celebrate Shinji, but Shinji hands Natsuki the fire crystal and tells her to absorb it once they return. Natsuki asks him if he's sure since he's also a fire element user, but he tells her it won't make much of a difference for him, so she gives him a peck for being so kind. Shinji squirms, but he later asks the girls if they remember why they came here in the first place. Yue guesses it's because of the tournament, but Shinji says he doesn't care about that, but he came here to find Yue's parents, which shocks her. Shinji tells her he saw her parents' name in the documents, so she asks him if he's the one who took out the missing page from the files, and he tells her he did that because he was worried she might get too fixated on it. He explains that the page talks about how her parents came to this singularity to look for something when she was just a kid, but they couldn't find them anymore. He asks her if they said anything to her before they left that could be a clue, but Yue says she doesn't remember anymore, and she might have forgotten their faces if the chairman hadn't given her their photograph. Shinji tells her it's fine and swears that he'll find her parents, and she thanks him, but warns that the singularity is dangerous. Regardless, he tells her not to worry because he'll take down whatever is hiding in the singularity. Shinji tells them to stay put while he and Yue go to check out what's deeper inside the cave, but Natsuki doesn't like the idea because it could be dangerous. Regardless, he tells her this singularity isn't so big a deal. Then he asks Shu if he'd like to come explore deeper with them, and he refuses because he doesn't like dangerous places. Because of that, Shinji gives him the task of keeping Natsuki and Mika safe, and he tells him he'll hold him responsible if anything happens to them. Shu doesn't like that since he had told him that he was a weakling they brought along to add to the numbers. But Shinji doesn't listen to him. When they get deeper into the cave, Shinji notices Yue's alertness, so he tells her not to be nervous. When they suddenly run into a bright energy, Shinji's system notifies him that it's a rare and high-level fire attribute spiritual energy called the Purifying Lotus Flame. Shinji considers this a stroke of luck, so he tells Yue to wait for a bit while he goes to check it out. When he gets close, Shinji notices the flame isn't giving off any smoke at all and doesn't feel hot, so he decides to absorb it to see how strong it is. When he does that, his fire attribute spiritual energy experiences insane increases, but sharks suddenly appear from the water beneath and target Shinji. Yue springs into action and tells Shinji to watch out while she stabs one of the sharks in the eye and kicks it away. When she pierces the other one with ice, they all run into the water. She turns to ask Shinji if he's fine, so he asks her to help hold off the sharks because it'll take him a few minutes to absorb the spiritual energy. She tells him he can count on her and promises to protect him. Suddenly, a huge reptile appears over her head and proceeds to get a crunchy bite of her head, but Yue jumps back just in time. When the mutant realizes it didn't get her, it circles back to attack her and successfully injures her arm. However, Yue uses an ice thorn piece attack to stab the monster's head, but the ice just melts away. This shocks her, so the mutant pours out a green fiery substance on her, so she rushes backward to get out of the way. She quickly creates a barrier to protect herself, but the mutant cracks her barrier with its tail and knocks her down. Blood gushes out of her mouth due to the impact of her back on the rock, and she soon becomes paralyzed. The monster closes in on her, but it soon gets a face full of high-level fire. It roars in pain as the fire peels off its skin, so Shinji tells it that anyone who harms his friend will die. Shinji asks the monster if it thinks a mere beast like it can defy him, but the beast roars at him to show it doesn't take orders from him. The reptile undergoes some sort of power-up that makes it bulk up, and it tries to attack Shinji, who simply jumps out of the way and unsheathes his sword. With his sword in hand, he performs a thunder slash and hits the beast in its back. The monster tries to hit him with its tail, but he quickly blocks it and creates some distance. He realizes the monster isn't so easy to deal with, especially since it's Spirit Spring level 7, but he's not ready to let it win. Shinji tells it that playtime is over, so he imbues his sword with the Purifying Lotus Flame to test its true strength. He uses a Purifying Lotus annihilating strike on the beast, and it splits in half right up to the tail. Shortly after, he goes to check on Yue, and she tells him she's glad he showed up because she would have gone to see her forefathers. However, Shinji tells her a single lizard like that isn't a big deal, but he advises her to be careful with surprise attacks like that. Moving on. Suddenly, Shinji senses something nearby and figures that the final boss has decided to show up. Out of the water, a huge dragon springs out and celebrates the fact that it's finally been freed from the seal at the bottom of the lake. Yue is shocked to see a talking dragon inside a singularity, and the dragon asks if it's so strange that a spirit spring level 9 like him can speak the language of humans. Shinji notices the dragon seems pretty dangerous, so he considers talking things out first. Shinji asks whether it created the singularity, so the dragon explains that it was created for him, but not by him. Confused, Yue asks him what he means by that, so he explains that 10 years ago, he was absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in this lake, so he could break free of his physical limitations until 2 humans intruded. The humans joined forces to defeat him, sealed him at the bottom of the lake, and then tried to absorb his power. Yue asks him if he remembers what they looked like and what happened to them after that, so the dragon informs them that their names were Wataru and Yukina. This shocks Yue, so she tells them that those people are her parents. This makes the dragon laugh because of how ironic it is that the one who freed him is the child of the person who sealed him. The dragon considers thanking them, but Shinji tells him he plans to kill them, even though he says he's thankful. Amused, the dragon explains that the weak are merely food for the strong, and that's the law of the jungle. The dragon tells Yue that she'll take responsibility for what her parents did, and when it flies into the air, Shinji tells her to quickly get out of here. However, Yue refuses to leave him behind, and also decides to stay to find out what happened to her parents. Meanwhile, the dragon blasts them with fire and tells them they can't escape from him. As the fire gets close, Shinji diverts it with his sword, and he tells Yue she can't handle this dragon, so he asks her to leave it to him. However, she refuses to leave him even though she's not strong enough to face it. Eventually, the dragon tells them he finds their words touching, but neither of them will be leaving this place alive. Shinji asks Yue to leave the dragon to him, and asks her to search the area for any traces of what her parents left behind, so she eventually concedes. As she starts running, the dragon tells her she can't get away, so it tries to smash her with its tail, but Shinji blocks it with his sword. Shinji tells the dragon to focus on him. While Yue runs around in the cave, she spots a huge white crystal, and when she looks closer, she's shocked to see her parents frozen inside. She tries to save them, so she deploys her Ice Thorn Pierce skill, but her ice does little against the crystal. This shocks and annoys her, so she starts to pound on the crystal until tears start to flow down her eyes. She wonders why it came to this. Meanwhile, the dragon tells Shinji that taking his revenge on them is just his first step. The dragon releases a barrage of attacks called the Dragon Wing Storm, but Shinji blocks them with a slash and tells the dragon that he can't kill him. This amuses the dragon, and he realizes that Shinji has some power, so he decides to finish this quickly since Shinji thinks he's strong. The dragon shoots a pure fireball at Shinji, but he gauges that it's too weak and creates a dark vortex to swallow up the attack. When the smoke from the destructive power clears out, Shinji asks the dragon if this is its full power and asks if a spirit spring level 9 is this weak. Meanwhile, the dragon is shocked that this guy was able to block that after he attacked with 80% of his power. Eventually, Shinji gives it one last chance and tells it to come at him with everything it's got or he won't spare its life. This infuriates the dragon, so he decides to show his full power and make Shinji eat his words. After flying higher into the air, the dragon activates his dragon breath of fire to destroy Shinji, but Shinji still asks him if that's all he's got. Shinji jumps into the air to meet the dragon, shocking it, and he slashes the dragon with his thunder flame, drawing blood. When he lands back on the ground, the dragon swears that he would have turned Shinji to ash long ago if it weren't for his sword, so Shinji throws his sword aside so they can fight directly. Shocked, the dragon asks him if he's serious, and when it realizes he is, it prepares an ultimate attack to finish him. The dragon shoots out a fiery attack called the Demon Dragon Wave, but Shinji doesn't get out of the way as it comes toward him. When the fire comes close, he catches it with his hand, then releases it back at the dragon, knocking it backward with its own attack. The dragon can't believe a mere human caught his ultimate attack with his bare hands, so Shinji tells the dragon that they're both Spirit Spring level 9, so it shouldn't be strange that he can catch something like that barehanded. However, Shinji tells the dragon that he's a relic of the past because this land is his now. Since he's out of moves, Shinji decides to show him his own moves, and the dragon turns to run because it can't get killed here after all the trouble it went through to reach Spirit Spring level 9 to get to the Iron Vein realm. However, Shinji refuses to let it escape, so he releases an attack called the Thunder Flame Extreme Flash and directs it at the dragon's back. The attack hits home, causing the dragon to scream in pain. After hitting the dragon, Shinji asks Yue to take him to the crystal. When he sees it, he has a bad feeling about the spell that's binding the crystal, so he asks the system to analyze the true nature of the spell. When the system analyzes it, he's told that the energy type is the curse type, and he needs to evolve to the Iron Vein realm to be able to absorb it. It becomes clear to Shinji that he can't break the crystal head-on in his present state, so he decides to try to crack it from below. When he sticks his sword into the ground, Yue asks him what he's doing, so he says he's going to dig out the crystal. He uses a move called the Destruction Slash, and he breaks the ground beneath them to reveal the full length of the crystal. After that, He tells Yue he's going to carry it out, which surprises her. Meanwhile, the dragon still runs away from Shinji and promises to come back for his revenge once his wounds get healed. Nearby, the guys Shinji saved talk about how strong he is to be able to defeat Ku with his final strike. They don't realize Ku is listening to them from behind another rock, but he's unable to do anything to them because of the arm he's lost. Suddenly, the men are startled and attacked by the dragon, who pours down dragon's breath on them. They're easily engulfed in the fire, and some of the men try to fight back with fire and ice techniques. However, the dragon is excited by how easily it's dominating the men and considers that this is how a ruler like him should feel. While some of the men try to face the dragon, Ku makes a run for it because he can't face the dragon in his present state and he can't afford to die here. When the dragon notices him running away, he pins Ku to the ground with his claw and asks him if he thinks he can escape his domination. Immediately, Ku starts to plead that he spare his life and offers to do anything, but the dragon asks what a weakling who's lost an arm can do. Ku offers to help kill the men, and the men start to curse him and wish that Shinji had killed him. Eventually, the dragon tells Ku that killing these men doesn't count as much to him, so Ku offers to free him from the singularity. This piques the dragon's interest, so he asks Ku if he can do that. Ku explains that he can use the spiritual power of the singularity's transfer point to destroy the barrier covering this space so the dragon can get to the outside world. However, the dragon is suddenly attacked by ice, which turns out to be Mika, who confronts Ku about betraying humanity. Regardless, Ku scoffs that he owes humanity nothing, and he's just good at reading changes in the times. This excites the dragon, so he gives Ku a chance to prove what he said. The dragon burns up Ku's wound, and a dragon-like hand grows out in the place of the one that was amputated. After that, the dragon tells Ku to prove his worth, and Ku calls him Lord. Mika and Natsuki quickly swing into action to stop Ku, but he tells them it's laughable that they think they can take him on. Ku tells the ladies to show him what they're made of, but Shu tries to advise that they don't fight amongst themselves. However, Mika tells him to shut up and activates her ice chain to attack. Ku tells her she's too weak and smashes the ice chains with one strike. Immediately, Natsuki appears behind him to land a kick, but he grabs her leg mid-air. After he grabs her, he slams her into the ground and brings out his sword to finish her. Natsuki realizes she's in trouble because she can't dodge, but releases a gust of wind that almost freezes Ku's body, allowing her to drag herself out of the way. After that, Ku tells the ladies their luck ends here, so he slams the ground with his sword and cracks the ground beneath them. The ground breaks open and the ladies fall through into the lower floor, and Mika gets knocked unconscious. Natsuki runs to her side and finds out she's seriously injured, but Ku soon appears and asks them to consider the difference in their strength. However, Natsuki calls Ku a disgrace and tells him he's dead when Shinji returns, but Ku tells them he plans to go see Shinji himself and not wait. He explains that this form of him is terrifyingly strong compared to what he was before, so he unleashes an attack to end the girls. Unable to dodge, Natsuki apologizes to Shinji in absentia and waits for the attack to hit them. However, a barrier suddenly appears to shield them from the attack. This surprises Natsuki, and Shu, who created the barrier, becomes relieved that he appeared in time because Shinji was going to have his head if anything happened to the girls. When Ku sees him, he asks if he was the one who shifted the trajectory of his attack, so Shu tells him he's amazing to have figured that out. Shu suggests they call it a day for now since they're all clear on that, but Ku decides to be careful with him since he's never heard about his kind of ability. He asks Shu what he means, so Shu asks him if he can escape with the dragon, and they'll pretend none of this ever happened. However, Natsuki, who was just almost killed, insists that's not acceptable because the unprepared military personnel outside will become sacrifices if they let the dragon out of the singularity. Shu tries to get her to calm down because both of them are injured and need treatment, and he doesn't want to get killed by Shinji. He reminds her he's not that strong and guesses that Ku and the dragon can't do much, even if they get to the outside world, especially since Ku was humiliated by Shinji, and they can just wait for Shinji to come back to take care of them. This annoys Ku, so he releases another wave of attacks at Shu, but somehow he manages to dodge them, even though he was surprised. Ku attacks with a flame 10-strike slash, but Shu blocks all 10 slashes and asks Ku to let them settle this peaceably because he's a pacifist. However, Ku becomes angrier and tells Shu to attack and stop defending. Because of this, Shu explains that he's been frail since he was little, so he's always avoided head-on fights the most. However, he adds that he's not necessarily bad at fighting, so he attacks Ku with his own power. Shu's attack releases similar flames at Ku, overwhelming him and exploding in his face. The explosion knocks Ku backward, and he asks Shu what kind of power he's awakened. But Shu explains that he can't just go around telling people about his power. Shu proposes that he take the dragon and leave because there's no point in still fighting. But Ku dashes toward him because there's no way he's going to lose to someone like him. When Ku slashes him, Shu blocks the attack with a barrier and tells Ku that his attacks are going to backfire on him. Somehow the slash that Ku did hits him in the back until he has to start running from his attack. Ku can't believe it, but Shu keeps pummeling him with his own attack, and Ku realizes this guy is too strong, and he wonders if he's going to lose this way. Meanwhile, Natsuki can't believe her eyes because she didn't know this guy was this powerful. Eventually, Ku attacks Shu with stronger flames that he believes he can never absorb, called Flame Shockwave. As the flames close in on Shu, he creates another hole in reality and redirects the flames at Ku, knocking him to the ground. While he's on the ground, Ku wonders why he's the one always losing. Suddenly, the dragon appears and tells Ku that playtime is over, and it laughs because of how fun it was to watch them fight. In an instant, the dragon sticks its claw into Shu's back and out of his stomach. The dragon thanks Shu for his spiritual energy because it has helped him heal his wounds and has helped him reach a higher plane of existence. After disposing of Shu's body, the dragon maps out his plan to break out and get his revenge on the humans who put him in this singularity. Meanwhile, Ku pleads with the dragon to take him along because he'll be useful, and the dragon admits that he did a good job destroying the singularity's barrier, but he tells him he has no need for trash. As Ku pleads for a chance, the dragon crushes his skull until it pops like a balloon. Once he's dead, the dragon turns to the ladies. Then Shu asks Natsuki to approach him for a moment because there's something he needs to tell her. She asks him what it is, so he tells her that he's going to create a crack in the singularity's exit when the dragon launches its attack, so he asks her to escape with Mika. She asks him what will happen to him since she can't leave him to die, but he reminds her that Shinji entrusted them to him, and he's going to do whatever it takes. The dragon soon launches his attack, so Shu creates a crack in reality, and Natsuki rushes in with Mika, but she pleads with Shu to come back alive. After the ladies escape, the dragon's attack lands on Shu and injures him. The dragon tells him he'll have to kill him first for trying to be a hero, but Shu tells him it's not going to be so easy to kill him. Meanwhile, Shinji becomes exhausted while carrying the crystal, so Yue suggests he rest for a bit because he's been carrying it for quite some time. However, he claims this is nothing, as it's just part of his training, but Mika and Natsuki suddenly fall down close to them through the rip that Shu created in reality. This startles Shinji, but Natsuki tells Shinji that he has to quickly help Shu. Shinji asks what happened to Shu and why they're so badly injured, so she tells him what happened. Shinji wonders if it's the same dragon that fled from him earlier, so he rushes there and tells them to take Mika and the crystal out of the singularity immediately. However, Yue insists that she's going with him because the dragon has already evolved to the Iron Vein stage, but Shinji promises her that he'll come back with Shu. As he leaves, the ladies hope he returns. Meanwhile, Shu keeps getting brutally pummeled, and he admits that the last attack hurts quite a bit. He creates another rift in reality, but he's unable to do it because his spiritual power is almost gone. The dragon notices he's unable to create a crack in space, so he tells Shu that it's because he's using his own spiritual energy to forcefully seal his cracks. He closes in on Shu and asks him how it feels to stare death in the face, so Shu honestly replies that it doesn't feel great, but this isn't exactly his first time. Because of that, the dragon further stabs him to make him beg for his life until Shu becomes totally covered with blood. Regardless, Shu gets up and explains that he's got more guts than that, and a little fire isn't enough to make him beg. Because of this, the dragon charges at him to end his life, but the dragon's attack is stopped by Shinji, who came right on time. The dragon spots Shinji, but Shinji simply thanks Shu and tells him he owes him once they get out of here, so he tells him to leave the rest to him. Eventually, Shinji tells the dragon he let him live the last time because he was worried about Yue's safety, but he tells him he won't be getting away this time. However, the dragon asks Shinji if he really thinks he can kill him, especially since he's evolved to the Iron Vein stage, and Shinji is still stuck at Spirit Spring level 9. The dragon shows Shinji that it'd be easier to kill him than to crush an ant since he's an Iron Vein, but Shinji asks him to give it his best shot since he's so confident. When the dragon launches at him again, Shinji jumps out of the way and slashes it across the face. After slashing it, Shinji realizes the dragon's defense has gotten stronger since it evolved into the Iron Vein stage. He decides to use a Thunder Flame Burst slash, but the dragon counters him with a Dragon Wing Storm. The attack knocks Shinji backward into a rock, but he still gets back up and asks if this is the best the Iron Vein stage can do. This infuriates the dragon, but Shinji responds with a Thunder Flame Burst slash. The dragon creates a dragon shield to protect itself from the attack and uses an attack called the Spiritual Storm Palm to return the attack. The Storm Palm slashes Shinji across the chest and causes him to cough out blood, so the dragon tells him to witness the difference in their power. Eventually, Shinji admits that it's a bit of a challenge for a Spirit Spring level 9 to defeat an Iron Vein. The dragon wonders what he means by a bit of a challenge because he makes it sound like he's been deliberately holding back, so Shinji smugly tells him that he has, so he can see what he's capable of. This shocks the dragon, and he wonders if Shinji has also evolved to Iron Vein stage. Eventually, the dragon tells Shinji to stop being ridiculous, since a mere human can't evolve into Iron Vein stage. However, Shinji confesses that he was planning to break through to the next stage in a safe location, and he was suppressing the spiritual energy in his body since he didn't know what to expect. But since the dragon has killed the other cultivators in the singularity, and since Mika and the others are somewhere safe, Shinji is sure nothing can go wrong. He brings up his screen, and the system asks him if he wants to break through since he's accumulated enough spiritual energy, and he clicks yes. Once he does that, unfathomable energy courses through his body, surprising the dragon. He immediately levels up and then tells the dragon to bring it on. The dragon can't believe that a mere human would reach Iron Vein stage, and he becomes afraid of the aura that Shinji is emitting. When Shinji notices the dragon hesitating, he asks him if he's getting cold feet, but the dragon accuses him of only borrowing the power temporarily. The dragon tells him he'll show him what real power is, but he suddenly notices that Shinji has slashed a part of his throat. Shinji tells the dragon not to worry because he's not going to let it die easily after tormenting Natsuki and the others. However, the dragon uses its fist to try to crush Shinji, but Shinji moves out of the way in an instant. The dragon can't believe the speed at which he's moving and wonders if he's reached the Iron Vein stage. Immediately, Shinji uses a thunderflame slash to cut up the dragon's stomach, and he tells the dragon to stop moving around so much so he doesn't miss his aim and accidentally kills him. This annoys the dragon, so he uses a Gale Razor slash on Shinji to cut him from all angles, but Shinji blocks it with his lightning flash slash. While that's happening, Shinji appears behind the dragon to land a fatal blow. The dragon senses him and tries to slash him, but he dodges it midair and drives his sword through its neck. The dragon doesn't understand how this is happening, but Shinji tells him his next attack will be for Shu. When the dragon realizes he's cornered, he decides to escape and he decides to use Shu to escape. He blasts Shu with some fire to kill him, but Shinji rushes in front of him to block the attack, and that gives the dragon enough time to fly out. Shinji rushes to Shu's side to check on him, but Shu tells him to focus on the dragon. However, Shinji assures him that he's not going to let the beast get away, and then he asks Shu to keep what he's about to do a secret. Confused, Shu agrees, so Shinji releases a great power that Shu realizes is the power of the Iron Vein stage. This surprises Shu, and he wonders if Shinji has 3 different kinds of spiritual energy in his body. Meanwhile, Shinji uses a Thunderflame Aurora slash from the ground, and it hits the dragon in midair, bursting through its stomach. Fatally injured, the dragon falls back to the ground, and Shu can't believe this. When Shinji comes to help him up, Shu asks him if he's reached the Iron Vein stage, but Shinji tells him he did incredibly well by being able to push the dragon that far. Shinji asks Shu why he hides his power if he's this strong, so Shu admits that he's afraid he might lose control of it one day, especially since his ability is something he calls spatial division. If he fails to control the space around him properly, he could cause great destruction to his surroundings. Shinji agrees that those with great power have to be careful, but he advises him that he doesn't need to be so afraid. Shinji explains that he can master it as long as he raises his skill, and that will help him protect more people. Meanwhile, the ladies successfully get out of the singularity, and they tell the officials that the Azure Dragon inside the singularity has evolved to the Iron Vein stage, and they inform them that Shinji and Shu are fighting for their lives. This shocks Gento and Yanagi because they didn't know there was a dragon there, and they're also horrified to learn that the other cultivators were killed by the dragon. This shocks Gento since the cultivators were all at Spirit Spring level 7 or higher, but Yue tells them the strength of the dragon was unimaginable. Natsuki tells Gento to assemble his troops to support Shinji so that something terrible won't happen, and Yue tells the chairman to help Shinji out too. Both men head out to mobilize men as backup immediately. Shortly after, Gento prepares several squads for the operation, and they soon rush in to prevent the Azure Dragon from breaking out. However, they find Shinji carrying Shu out of the entrance, and the ladies are shocked that they're safe. Shinji tells them they're fine, so he asks Natsuki what all of this is. She explains that they were about to head in for backup. So Shinji tells them the Azure Dragon is dead, and they don't need to worry anymore. This shocks them, so they ask him if he was the one who defeated it. He admits he did and tells them to check for any survivors since the singularity should be safe now. Shortly after, Gento leads the soldiers to check for survivors, but when they enter, they're shocked at the sight of the dead dragon. The men are shocked because they've never seen a dragon before, and they realize that Shinji's strength is on a whole other level. Gento wonders how Shinji was able to kill a dragon at Iron Stage, and he can't believe his eyes. They soon find some survivors and help them out. Sometime later, Shu gets treatment, and Shinji is told that he'll live because he didn't lose much blood. When Shu wakes up, Shinji asks him how he's feeling, so he jokes that he's relieved that he's not dead yet. Eventually, Shu asks Shinji if he could keep his real strength secret for a while, and Shinji promises not to say a word. After that, Shinji heads out to check on Yue's parents. He enters the room where Yanagi and Yue are and asks them if they've made any progress with their analysis, but Yue tells him they've still not found a way to break the crystal. Yanagi admits that the seal made by the crystal is incredibly hard, and the crystal won't budge despite the methods they've tried. Shinji recalls that the system told him he'd be able to absorb the energy used to seal the seal once he reached the iron vein stage, so he decides to give it a shot since he's at that level now. To do that, Shinji asks everyone else except for Yue to leave for a bit, and Yanagi leads the scientists out of the room. Eventually, Yue asks him what he's planning to do and if there's anything she can do to help, so he explains that there's a powerful sealing energy contained inside the crystal and it seems to be highly unstable. He explains that he's going to absorb the energy into his body so he can break the crystal's seal, but Yue gets worried about him getting hurt and wonders if it's even possible. Shinji assures her he'll be fine because this level of energy is no big deal at all. However, he adds that this incident made it clear that she and the others are growing at a rate that's too slow, and they won't be able to handle crises that lie ahead. This surprises Yue, so she wonders why he's calling them slow when he's growing at a ridiculous pace, especially since it's ridiculous to break into the iron vein stage after awakening for a few months. However, Shinji explains that he's going to absorb the energy and share some of the spiritual energy with her so she can speed up her evolution. This surprises Yue, so she asks him if he's also managed to awaken ice attribute spiritual energy, but he tells her he only has thunder, fire, and light. Confused, she asks him how he plans to share it with her since her body can't accept other kinds of spiritual energy. However, Shinji remembers that he got a spiritual energy pill as a bonus once he got to Iron Vein stage. Consuming this pill allows a person to add a new spiritual energy attribute to their body, so Shinji tells Yue not to worry because he got the perfect item for her when he was in the singularity, so he hands it to her. Yue is surprised because she recognizes it as the Spirit Spring elixir described in the ancient texts. She knows the pill is extremely precious, and only ancient apothecaries should be able to make them, and it's impossible to have them in such a modern era. However, Shinji just tells her to hurry up and take it, so Yue refuses because she can't take something so valuable from him. She pleads with him to keep it because it'll be useful in the future, but he tells her he has plenty of ways to get stronger, and this pill doesn't really matter to him. He also reminds her that this is the only way he'd be able to transfer spiritual energy to her so her body can withstand it. Eventually, Yue agrees and takes the pill. When she feels the intense spirit energy, she laments that her body can't handle it, and she starts to bleed and scream. Shinji calms her down and tells her not to resist the flow of the spiritual energy, so he helps her ease the flow. Placing one hand on her head, he places his other hand on the crystal to absorb the energy used to seal it. Yue is shocked when she realizes what he's about to do, so he tells her she'll also become a dual attribute practitioner. Shinji absorbs the light energy from the crystal and directs it into her body, so Shinji tells her the power is hers from now on. Sometime later, Shinji returns home, and Natsuki rushes to welcome him. She asks him if he was able to rescue Yue's parents, and he says he did. Apparently, Yue's parents are in a coma in the hospital, but they project that they'll wake up within a few days. Excited, Natsuki asks about Yue and learns that she's been hospitalized for observation to make sure there are no side effects since she's just awakened a new attribute. It surprises Natsuki that Yue has awakened a new attribute, but she's soon interrupted by a call from her best friend, Haruka, who rarely ever calls. Natsuki asks Haruka if something is wrong, but Haruka asks her if she saw a practitioner from their Fuyutsu city named Shu Sumida at the tournament. Natsuki asks her if something is wrong, so Haruka explains that a super mutant level monster has appeared in Fuyutsu City, and it has wiped out the army and the practitioners. Natsuki becomes alarmed and asks Haruka where she is, so Haruka responds that she's in an underground shelter and they're in a hopeless situation. Natsuki tries to calm her down and promises to contact her grandfather immediately so they can come save her. Haruka confesses that she's given up, but she just wanted to reach out to Shu to tell him not to come back so he doesn't get killed. Immediately, Natsuki tries to speak to Shinji about it, but he asks her how fast they can get to Fuyutsu City from here. Since she got a positive reply from him, Natsuki assures Haruka they'll come save her. But the line soon starts breaking, and Natsuki loses the connection. Shinji tells Natsuki to let him handle it, so he asks her to get a helicopter ready while he goes to find Shu so they can discuss a concrete plan of action. Shortly after, Shinji heads to the hospital to find Shu enjoying some cold water. When he asks Shu how his body is, Shu jokes that he may not have much time left to live because he thinks he saw the Grim Reaper in his room. However, Shinji gets right to it and tells him about the super mutant level monster that appeared in Fuyutsu City that wiped out practitioners and the army. He adds that they got a call from a girl named Haruka, Natsuki's best friend, but Shu immediately interrupts to know if something happened to Haruka. Shinji asks him if he knows her. So Shu says he does, because she's the daughter of the Fuyutsu City Practitioners Association chairman, and every member knows her. Shinji wonders if Shu has feelings for this Haruka girl, but he just tells him he's heading to the city for a rescue mission, but he needs a guide who knows the terrain, so he asks Shu if he can move. Immediately, Shu gets out of the bed and tells him he can guide him through Fuyutsu with his eyes closed. After that, Shinji heads to the base to borrow a laptop capable of satellite communication. The officer in charge acknowledges his achievements in the military, but explains that they can't hand over the military laptops because they contain classified information. However, Shinji tells him it's a decision, not a request. Because of that, the officer pleads with him because the military has its own regulations, and he doesn't have the authority to access sensitive information at will, even though he has extraordinary combat power. Eventually, Shinji asks him if he thinks it's the best time to talk about rules when a super mutant-level monster just appeared in Fuyutsu City. That shocks the officers, and they wonder why they haven't received any intel on it. Shinji tells them that he heard the local forces in Fuyutsu have already been wiped out, so he forcefully takes one of the laptops and leaves. Shortly after, he meets with Shu on the helicopter. Shu tells him he can't believe the military lent him the laptop since it's packed with classified data, but Shinji tells him the data is most likely old intel and trash since the Earth's spirit energy has been restored. Soon after, Natsuki appears, and she tells him to be careful as the helicopter takes off. Shinji assures her he'll be fine and asks her to pretend he ran out of the convenience store for some soy sauce because he'll be back before she knows it. As the helicopter takes off, Natsuki hopes he returns safely and makes it in time. While in the air, Shinji asks Shu how many cultivators were stationed at Fuyutsu City and what level the strongest was. Shu replies that Fuyutsu is a mid-sized city with about 5,000 cultivators, and most of them were around Spirit Spring level 6. Apparently, about 20 of them were Spring level 9, and Haruka Wada is known as Fuyutsu's strongest because she was likely at the upper end of level 9. Concerning the military, they had an elite force of about 1,000 stationed at the garrison, along with a ton of surface-to-air missiles. Shu finds it surprising that they were all wiped out, but the pilot tells the men they'll soon be entering Fuyutsu City's airspace shortly. When they enter the city, they're shocked to see the whole thing on fire, along with low-level monsters roaming around. Shinji can't understand what's going on, as it seems the people have all been turned into zombies, so he wonders if this is the work of dark attribute spiritual energy. The pilot asks where they should land, but Shinji tells him there's no need to land, and asks him to just open the door. That surprises the pilot, so he tells Shinji that they're 6,000 meters in the air, but he tells the man to open the door. When the man does that, Shinji tells them he'll jump down to take care of the small fry, and Shu tells him he's seriously not right in the head. Shinji jumps down, and the pilot protests that his body will be shattered into pieces at this height, but Shu tells him not to underestimate the iron vein. Shinji lands on the ground with an explosive entrance, knocking back the monsters. When the smoke clears, Shinji is ambushed by the monsters, but he cuts hundreds of them down with one swing of his sword. Some others charge towards him for slaying their homies, but Shinji is prepared to finish them. The monsters rush towards him, and one of them tries to smash him into the ground, but Shinji moves out of the way and slices him in half. After cutting down a few of them, the rest of them start to hesitate. In the helicopter, the pilot wonders if Shinji is even human, but he also considers that he'll run out of steam against so great a number of monsters, no matter how strong he is. However, Shu tells the pilot he's still underestimating Shinji. On the ground, Shinji keeps tearing up the monsters. At one point, he levitates off the ground and starts to radiate fire attribute energy. This shocks the pilot, but Shinji uses a thunder flame extermination technique that burns off all the monsters around him. The energy is so strong that the pilot has to move the helicopter out of the way to avoid getting grilled, and he wonders if a human can really display such power. Eventually, Shu tells the pilot to find a suitable place to land so they can meet up with Shinji. Confused, the pilot asks him if he's not jumping too, but Shu explains that he'd turn into ground beef if he does that since he's just a regular civilian. Shortly after, they get to the ground and Shu hops into a car. He remembers how utterly destructive Shinji's power is and wonders if this is the real power of an iron vein. He drives to meet Shinji to check if he's hurt, but Shinji tells him he's all right. Shinji enters the car and asks if he knows where the evacuation site Haruka mentioned is, so Shu says it's on the outskirts of Fuyutsu City. Shinji suggests they rescue her first, but he also asks Shu if he doesn't think something is strange about the situation in Fuyutsu. Shu asks him what he means, so Shinji mentions that a super mutant appearing during a normal disaster doesn't usually get this bad. Shinji believes there are a lot of monsters and the affected area is too huge, so much so that it looks like someone planned it. Shu asks him if he's trying to say there's someone like Ku here, and Shinji admits that it's highly likely. Meanwhile, Shu hopes that Haruka is okay. When they get to the factory where the shelter is, Shinji notices it's too quiet and senses a trap. Both men head in, but Shinji finds it odd that a shelter doesn't have a single defensive measure set up. He wonders if they didn't have time to set them up, or if someone destroyed them, but they soon find Haruka on the ground while looking around. Shu rushes to check on her, and he tries to wake her up but doesn't get a response. Because of her serious wounds and messed up internal spirit energy flow, Shu tells Shinji she needs immediate treatment. However, Shinji finds something strange, and he tells Shu to look out when something suddenly appears. Shinji rushes back as a cage drops to cover Shu, and someone nearby laughs that the hero has come to rescue his goddess. Shu recognizes the voice, and when the guy steps out, he refers to the person by the name Takada Kirya. Shu asks Takada what he's doing here, so Takada tells him he used Haruka as bait to draw out Natsuki because he plans to get her so he can make the entire military leadership dance to his tune. Shu asks Kirya why he's doing this when the Fuyutsu City Cultivator Association never did anything to him. Shu reminds him that he was on death row, and he'd still be rotting in prison if it were not for the fact that he awakened a powerful spirit energy. However, Kirya tells Shu he's still whining about the past because no one needs law and order in the world they live in right now. Kirya explains that power is everything now, and the weak are just meant to be weeded out. Shu tells him he has no right to bend the whole world to his will because he's strong and tramples over the lives of the others in Fuyutsu City. However, Kirya tells him he doesn't take orders from the Fuyutsu Cultivator Association, and they're dead because they're weak. Annoyed, Shu asks Kirya if he knows how many cultivators died just for his so-called training. He reminds him that even Haruka risked her life so he could level up, and he wonders how he could hurt her like that. Kirya feels no remorse, and he says they all died because they were stupid, and they wasted their lives for nothing. This annoys Shu, and Shinji finds this interesting. Kirya asks Shinji who he is, so Shinji introduces himself as Shu's friend, and he tells Kirya that he believes his way of thinking is too naive. Kirya asks him who he thinks he is, so Shinji asks if he really believes being strong means he can determine the rules of the world because someone stronger showing up would mean they can determine whether he lives or dies. This annoys Kirya, so he asks Shinji if he's threatening him. But Shinji just tells him he's warning him because he's still far from being strong. Immediately, Kirya runs towards him with a fistful of lightning to punch him. Shu tells Shinji to watch out because Kirya also uses a lightning attribute, but Shinji just blocks his attack with his sword. It surprises Kirya that Shinji can block his attack, but the system soon notifies Shinji that he can absorb the intense lightning-attributed spirit energy to increase his lightning attribute level. When Kirya moves backward, Shinji tells Shu to take Haruka and get out, but Shu explains that he doesn't seem to be able to use his power for some reason. His situation makes Kirya laugh, so Kirya asks Shu if he thinks he'd let him escape that easily. He explains that the iron cage is made from a special material designed specifically to hold cultivators like him. Anyone trapped inside loses their powers and is no different from ordinary humans. Because of that, Shinji tells Shu to stay down, and he strikes the cage to see how strong it really is. The attack destroys the cage, so Shu opens a portal to get Haruka somewhere safe and return. However, Shinji tells him there's no need to come back because he'd just get in his way. When Shu leaves, Kirya recalls that he's heard about Shinji, but he asks Shinji if he really thought he'd be scared. Shinji tells him he's just stating the fact that he's still weak, but this annoys Kirya, so he tells him to stop acting cocky just because he cut through one cage. Kirya creates a lightning spear, and he calls Shinji cultivator trash and tells him not to underestimate him. In an instant, Kirya rushes towards him to use his kill thrust move, but Shinji just dodges it and tells Kirya he has some moves. Kirya finds it surprising that Shinji could dodge this attack, but he keeps fighting because he believes he can't keep it up for long. Kirya keeps chasing him around, and he eventually asks Shinji why he's not even fighting back when he's supposed to be the strong one. Kirya tells Shinji that it seems all he can do is dodge, but Shinji tells him that he's disappointing him and asks if this is truly his full strength. Shinji tells Kirya that he's going to die here today if this is all the power he's got, but Kirya tells him to shut up and prepares to show him what someone at Spirit Spring level 9 can do. Kirya goes into a rage and rains down thunder spears on Shinji, but Shinji dodges them all and tells him he's too slow. This further infuriates Kirya, who comes in for a direct strike, but Shinji still blocks his attack. Shinji tells him he has power but not enough brains to back it up, so he decides to show Kirya the difference in their abilities. In an instant, Shinji bends under Kirya's spear with his blade in hand, and he tells him this is the end. With one strike, he lands his fiery blade on Kirya's center, causing him to lose a lot of blood. As Kirya is injured, he wonders how this is possible since he's at Spirit Spring level 9, which is the highest tier, but Shinji asks him if that's all he has. Surprised, Kirya asks him if he's also at Spirit Spring level 9, but he doubts it because he can't sense any aura coming from Shinji, so Shinji tells him he's at Iron Vein level 1. This shocks Kirya, and he can't believe that someone has reached Iron Vein realm. Seeing the shock in his eyes, Shinji asks him if he's now scared, so Kirya begs for forgiveness and admits that he was wrong. He even swears to serve Shinji as a faithful servant if he lets him live. However, Shinji reminds him how he said that the strong make the rules and the weak just follow them. Shinji asks him why he wants to change the rules now that he's the one that is weak, so Kirya confesses that he wasn't the ringleader in this attack, but he was just following orders and he had no choice. Shinji doesn't believe this, so he puts his sword to his throat and asks him how that's possible since he's practically the strongest cultivator in Fuyutsu City. Kirya confesses that there's someone else stronger than him, and the whole thing that happened in the city was that person's plan. Kiriya explains that this person said he wanted to test something, like it was just an experiment, and he adds that this person doesn't care about human life and the military are nothing but pawns to him. Intrigued, Shinji asks him how strong he is, so Kiriya says this person told him he's at Iron Vein level 3. Shinji finds that interesting, so Kiriya asks him if he's going to let him go. But Shinji has other plans. As Shinji is about to finish him, Kiriya protests that he's told him everything he knows, and he pleads that he let him go since he's kept the end of the deal. Shinji tells him they never agreed to a deal, so he stabs him with his sword despite his pleading. After he stabs him, Shinji tells him that even though things have changed after spirit energy returned to the earth, it doesn't change the fact that the evil must face consequences. Kiriya collapses in his own blood and taunts Shinji by asking if he thinks he's a hero, and he tells him he's a pathetic loser who can't stand against the person who sent him. Kiriya tells him he's going to die soon, too, because he can't beat his boss, who's Iron level 3. However, Shinji assures him he'll send his boss straight to hell too, and he tells Kiriya to go there because he'll be right behind him. When Kiriya loses his life, the system informs Shinji that he can absorb the lightning-attributed spirit energy, and he absorbs it. Once he does that, his lightning spirit energy levels up, and it reaches level 2. Shinji's body becomes filled with immense power, and he experiences the power of Iron Vein level 2. When Shinji steps out, Shu is glad to see he's okay, and he's shocked when he learns that Kiriya was killed so quickly, especially since he was at max level of spirit level 9. However, Shinji just smiles and tells Shu he should be able to handle something like that too when he reaches the Iron Vein realm. Eventually, Shinji asks him if the girl he's been crushing on is safe, so Shu becomes flustered and asks what he's talking about. Shinji tells him he saw how furious and desperate he was when he saw her collapse, so he asks what her condition is. Shu doesn't argue, but he replies that her vitals are stable. However, her consciousness has been sealed by a dark attribute spirit energy, and she might end up as a vegetable if they don't break the seal soon. Upon hearing that, Shinji assures him that he should be able to break the seal quickly because his lightning attribute has resistance to dark attributes. Shinji connects his lightning energy to Haruka's body, and the dark energy leaves her, causing her to wake up. When she wakes up, she becomes disoriented and asks who they are and where she is. Shinji notices she seems silly, and he wonders if this is Shu's type. After some time, Haruka settles down and recognizes Shu. She demands to know why he's here, so he tells her he heard about the situation, so he returned from Tenkaichi City. She becomes surprised that he rushed back to save her, so she starts shaking him because Fuyutsu City is dangerous and a coward like him who always avoids head-on fights won't change anything. She warns him that he'll just end up dying for nothing, so Shinji tells her it's a bit much to call someone who took down a max-level Spirit Spring level 9 a coward. Confused, Haruka asks him who he's talking about, and she starts to shake Shu around for dragging others into this dangerous place at this time. Eventually, she lets him go, so Shu explains that he couldn't ignore a distress call like that, and he had to guide Shinji because the terrain in Fuyutsu is complicated. Finally, she calms down and realizes there's no point in blaming him since he's already here. She thanks them for coming to help, and Shinji notices that it seems these two have mutual feelings for each other. When Haruka suggests they leave the city immediately because it'll be harder to get out the longer they stay, Shinji asks her what exactly happened in the city. Haruka explains that it's been raining non-stop since Shu and the others left for Tenkaichi City. At first, they thought it was a change in the weather, but the rain never stopped. At some point, people who got wet from the rain started turning into zombies. At first, they thought it was just rain, but the people started to experience changes in their bodies and their minds started to deteriorate as well until they became zombies. Those who turned attacked everyone around them, including their own families. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late, and everyone who stepped outside became a victim. Even though the military and the Cultivators Association tried to break the situation, spirit energy attacks didn't work so well, so the city became overrun with zombies. Shinji asks if the military and Cultivators Association members also turned into zombies, so Haruka says not all of them did. Those who were caught in the rain at the start did, but most of them managed to avoid it. Shinji asks her where they are now, so Haruka says they've disappeared. Confused, Shu asks her what she means by that, so she explains that they discovered a powerful energy signal coming from the tower at the center of Fuyutsu City. It was as if this tower was gathering some kind of abnormal spirit energy, and they suspected that it was the cause of the disaster. The higher-ups from the military and the Cultivators Association went to investigate, but everyone who went to the tower just vanished. Shinji finds that interesting, so Haruka adds that there were no bodies, no cries for help, no signs of battle, and nothing else. That intrigues Shinji, so he mentions that someone will know the key to solving this mystery. He mentions that he took out Kiriya a while ago, which shocks Haruka since Kiriya was a top cultivator at max value Spirit Spring level 9. Shinji just explains that Kiriya had said that this disaster was man-made, and that the person behind it all was a cultivator at Iron Vein Level 3. Haruka is shocked to hear there's a Level 3 Iron Vein cultivator in Fuyutsu City, especially since Kiriya was supposed to be the strongest. Shu says that Kiriya may have lied because he was scared for his life. But Shinji doesn't think he would lie when he was at the point of death. Suddenly, the strange rain starts again, so they rush away to find shelter. While Shu helps Haruka into the car, Shinji notices that someone is there, and he wonders if this mystery person came because he found out his minion was killed. Shu tells Shinji to get into the car, but someone suddenly places a hand on Shinji's back, and Shinji tells Shu he was right that their mystery person is really Iron Vein Level 3. Shu and Haruka try to tell him to watch out, but the strange person asks Shinji if he's the one behind this whole incident, but Shinji just punches him without turning back, knocking him a few feet away. When the guy collapses to the ground, Shu realizes that it was a soldier from the military who was just possessed by dark energy. Suddenly, the dark energy overcomes the soldier again until his body disappears. In a moment, the dark being appears behind Shinji to tear his head off, but the others signal him that the assailant is behind him. Quickly, Shu creates a portal in front of the being and sucks him in before he can get to Shinji. Shu signals to Shinji to get in quickly, so he gets into the car and they drive off. While they're driving, Shu asks Shinji what on earth that thing was, but Haruka tells them whatever it is not dead yet, and it's after them. The dark being morphs into a jaguar and starts chasing them, so Shinji asks Haruka about the tower she spoke about. She asks him what he plans to do, so Shinji tells her the being chasing them is most likely an assassin, the real mastermind sent to kill them. He believes this thing must have come for revenge because he killed Kiriya, and he believes that this incident in Fuyutsu City won't end until they kill it. Haruka tells him he can't be serious since the being is Iron Vein Level 3, but Shinji tells them to take him to the tower. They rush to the tower with the being behind them, and when they get there, the being leaps on their truck. Before it crushes them, Shinji strikes it on the back and knocks it to the ground. He immediately tells Shu to take Haruka and leave the city, but Shu refuses because he has to fight alongside him. Shinji tells him to leave and not stupidly throw away his life to fight such a powerful enemy. However, Shu asks him to promise he'll make it back alive, and he soon presses the pedal. While he's driving, he wishes he had more power so that Shinji wouldn't have to face this fight alone. Shortly after, the person Shinji came to see shows up. The dark jaguar gets back up, and Shinji realizes this monster won't die easily. Shinji rushes at it and decides to play with it till he's satisfied. When they come close, he strikes it with a huge lightning strike, injuring it, and then he charges after it to finish it off. As he's about to strike it, a girl shows up from within it and asks Shinji to help her. Shinji believes the monster is using cheap tricks, and he goes ahead to destroy the screaming girl until the entire being explodes into pieces. When he's done, Shinji turns around to meet the real monster and see how strong Iron Vein 3 really is. When he steps into the building, he finds a pool filled with dark energy water, and he realizes it's the same water that the monster he fought was made of. When he walks further, he finds someone inside who tells him that he never thought he'd run into an Iron Vein Level 2 expert here, and he finds it amazing that Shinji killed Kiriya. Shinji asks him if he's the one who caused the situation in Fuyutsu City, and the guy admits he is, and introduces himself as Kaido Kusei, an Iron Vein Level 3. Kaido explains that this so-called spirit water was forged from the corrupted spirit energy and grudges of tens of thousands from Fuyutsu City. With it, Kaido can freely create any kind of immortal creature at will. Kaido explains that because of this, he's the god of this land. Eventually, Kaido tells him that only a handful of people have reached their level in the entire world, so he asks Shinji if he'd like to join forces with him. He offers Shinji the position of number 2, where he'd command countless people under him, and he offers him power, wealth, and women. However, Shinji asks him if that's all he has to say. When Kaido doesn't answer, Shinji tells him he can die now if that's the case. So he creates a lightning strike in his hand to take him out while Kaido creates a dark energy barrier around himself. Both their powers rival each other's, but Shinji manages to peel off a part of Kaido's dark protective cover, which surprises Kaido. Spotting that opening, Shinji punches him backward, and this makes Kaido cough and commend his skills. Eventually, Kaido tells him that he's going to die here since he doesn't understand the reason, so he summons several dark beings from the spirit water. When Shinji sees them, he realizes that everyone who disappeared from the city was turned into the spirit water. Kaido releases the army of dark beings at him, but Shinji gets his sword and prepares to set them all free. He immediately uses a sacred flame on them and burns away the dark energy. And this annoys Kaido. Annoyed, he threatens to blow Shinji to pieces, so he fires dark energy at him. Shinji gets out of the way by the skin of his teeth and sustains an injury on the side of his face. He's surprised that Kaido was able to suppress the Thunderflame shield he put in front of himself, but Kaido starts to laugh and tells him he can't escape. Kaido blasts Shinji with several dark energy attacks, but he cuts through it. Suddenly, Shinji notices that Kaido's aura is not overpowering his thunder flame, but it's eroding it. Because of that, he's forced to retreat. Kaido tells him he's acting cocky because he has thunder flame aura energy, but he explains that his dark tide aura energy can invade and consume the aura energy of every other attribute. Kaido gives him one last chance to kneel before him or die, but Shinji covers himself with his lightning attribute to reduce the overwhelming effect of Kaido's dark aura. Shinji realizes he needs to figure out something quickly, and the system notifies him that his energy is being eroded by the dark tide aura. The system informs him that he can fuse with the fire attribute to generate a light flame aura that counters the dark tide aura, which surprises Shinji. When he turns off his lightning attribute, Kaido teases him for giving up easily and says his strength wasn't much after all. However, Shinji fuses his flame energy with his light energy, causing an explosive release of energy that knocks Kaido backward. Kaido wonders what kind of aura this is, so Shinji tells him this is the flame that purifies darkness, the light flame. Kaido retorts that it's not possible that his aura can be purified by anyone, so he attacks Shinji with his dark energy to kill him, but the energy is unable to penetrate his light covering. Shinji immediately tells him he's going to wrap this up quickly if that's all the attack he's got. This annoys Kaido, so he decides to show him the real power of the level 3 Iron Vein. He uses a secret technique that he was keeping secret initially. The technique causes Kaido to transform into a huge dark beast, and he charges towards Shinji to land a finishing punch. He punches Shinji and pushes through the wall behind him and swears that he'll grind him into mincemeat. Kaido keeps raining punches at him with great speed, and he goes ahead to use an attack called Dark Tide to pour dark fire on him. Suddenly, a ray of light shines out of the place Shinji is in and hits Kaido in the face. Shinji soon appears unharmed in his light covering, so he tells Kaido he's going to die here if he doesn't have a new attack to fight him. Immediately, Shinji launches his light flame attack, and this annoys Kaido because his dark tide shouldn't be affected by purification. The attack hits Kaido in the face, forcing him to peel off the outer covering of dark energy to reveal his internal structure. Kaido admits that he never expected that he'd be pushed to go this far, and he explains that he has evolved into a higher life form and he discarded his human body long ago. With his true form, Kaido tells Shinji he'll show him the power of a level 3 Iron Vein, because this form he's in is invincible. Amused, Shinji asks him if he knows who he's facing to tag himself invincible, and he activates his secret light flame technique called Holy Flame Judgment. Meanwhile, Shu asks Haruka to try to reach anyone outside, but she complains that there's no signal. While they're driving, they notice a big explosion coming from the tower building. Shu guesses that this must be Shinji's ultimate technique, and he concludes that the city has been saved. Shu decides to turn the vehicle around to go join Shinji since there's no need to run again. Inside the tower building, the explosion affects Kaido's body and blows off one of his horns. Kaido can't believe what's happening because someone who's not an Iron Vein level 3 can defeat him. However, Shinji asks him who told him levels are absolute, and as Kaido's body explodes, he tells Shinji that those who sent him won't let him get away. Kaido tells him he's angered people he can't imagine and tells him he'll be waiting for him in hell as he explodes. Once he's gone, Shinji thinks about the fact that someone else is pulling the strings. Suddenly, a dark card appears. Shortly after, Shu and Haruka reach the site, so Shu rushes to check on Shinji. Shinji confirms he's fine, and Haruka wonders how strong this Shinji guy is. When she sees all the destruction, she wonders if a human can really do this. Eventually, Shinji tells them he took down Kaido Kusei, and he asks them if his name rings a bell. The name shocks Haruka, so she says that's impossible because Kaido was supposed to be dead. Shinji asks her what she knows, so she explains that Kaido was a death row inmate from before the recovery of the spirit energy, and the culprit behind dozens of brutal murders. Back when she was working in the military, she explains that she saw him get executed right before her eyes, and she says there's no way he had survived. Shinji agrees that he had another form, and it sounds believable that he's a corpse. After that, Shinji shows them the black card he found on the scene of Kaido's death. So he asks them if this card could have been what was used to revive him, and Haruka recognizes the card as the mark of the Dawnlight Church. Apparently, it's a secret group founded by cultivators who mutated naturally in the early days of the spirit energy's return. This group believes themselves to be humanity's ultimate evolution, and they see ordinary people as nothing but dead weight. Their creed is rulership by the strong, forging a new order, and the survival of the fittest. Eventually, Shinji tells them Kaido is now dead, so he believes the crisis in Fuyutsu City should now be over. As for the Dawnlight Church, he decides that they'll deal with them some other time, but he has to go home now because he hasn't slept in 2 days. Haruka quickly thanks Shinji for saving Shu and the rest of them, so she grabs Shu's head so he can thank Shinji too. But Shinji tells them it's not necessary because he only came because someone asked him to. This confuses Haruka, so she asks him what he means, and Shinji explains that Shu threw himself into the mission despite his own injuries the moment he heard she was in danger. This surprises Haruka, so she starts to pamper Shu to find out when he got injured. Shu quickly explains that he believes Shinji is referring to Haruka's best friend, Natsuki, whom she had called for help, so Haruka decides to quickly call Natsuki to tell her she's safe. The next day, the leaders of the Cultivators Association meet up and they learn about the disaster that broke out in Fuyutsu City after the energy contamination. The report explains that about 80% of the area is now uninhabitable, and civilian casualties number in the tens of thousands. The Supreme Commander asks about the recovery efforts in the city, so one of the men informs him that the city's main roads have been reopened, and those who were trapped by zombies have begun returning home. The commander realizes the danger wasn't greater because of Shinji, and he tells them that this incident should serve as a warning to them all. He admits he doesn't know how the Dawnlight Church managed to resurrect the dead and even push them as far as Iron Vein Realm 3, but he believes there must be forces at work behind them beyond anything they can imagine. The commander orders that the military strengthen surveillance on the Dawnlight Church, especially around their base in Seihoku City, and he suggests they request support from the Cultivators Association. One of the leaders of the Cultivator group informs him that Seihoku City is the church's central hub, and their activities there are strong. Apparently, they've sent elite squads there many times, but not a single person has returned alive. Because of this, the man tells the commander that relying on the association alone won't be enough, so the commander explains that they'll send in their own people to support them. Finally, the commander tells them that any information regarding Shinji is to be classified at the highest level because they can't ever let any information about him leak outside. The commander tells them their country will never fall as long as Shinji is alive. Later that evening, Shinji brings home the large order Natsuki requested and asks her if she's not asking for too much. When he enters, she toasts to him and comes to hug him. Because she smells of alcohol, he realizes she's drunk, so he asks Yue why she didn't say something to stop her. Yue explains that Natsuki wouldn't listen to her anyway, so Shinji lays the drunk girl somewhere. Shinji looks at Yue without responding, so she asks him what's wrong. He tells her to smile more because she has a beautiful smile and she should use it, and this shocks her. Eventually, Shinji asks her how her parents are doing, so she explains that they're recovering well and they'll soon be put in rehab after the life support machines are moved in a few days. She thanks him for all his help, but Shinji tells her there's no need because he wouldn't have reached the Iron Vein without her help. After that, he asks her if she's mastered using both spirit energy attributes yet, so she gladly tells him she has. Meanwhile, the Dawnlight Church members gather for a meeting, and one of them notifies a priest that the spirit communication tower in Fuyutsu City has been destroyed and Kaido Kusei has been killed. This shocks the members sitting around, but the priest simply asks to know who did it. The informant mentions that a cultivator named Shinji Fuji did it, and the priest becomes enraged that a mere cultivator dares to defy the Dawnlight Church. The priest announces to the group that this isn't just a challenge to the Dawnlight Church, but it's blasphemy against God, so they must receive divine vengeance. The other brainwashed fools cheer the priest on, so the priest tells the informant to ensure he eliminates Shinji, and the man eagerly accepts the orders. The next day, Yue and Shinji spar outside, so he asks her to show him how far she's come. In an instant, she dashes toward him to kick him in the face, but he dodges it. Before she lands, she tries to kick him again, but he dodges it and commends her for not forgetting her basics. After that, he tells her to show him how she can merge the two spirit energies, so she activates her dual energies and fires one blast at him. Shinji blocks the attack with his light covering and tells her she's not fusing the powers but just firing the two of them separately with a delay. He asks her to focus first and think about merging them on the inside. Yue eventually focuses on this, and she successfully merges the two energies and fires them from one hand. The attack seems to trap Shinji in a mass of ice, so Yue rushes to check on him because she didn't do that on purpose. However, Shinji easily breaks out of the ice and commends her ability. He adds that she can finally turn spirit energy into her strength, and tells her to remember to use her spirit energy this same way in a fight. After that, he heads inside to go eat, and he tells Yue she can visit someone. Shortly after, the members of the Dawnlight Church enter Asami City, so the group asks the leader who was charged with the mission if Shinji lives there. The leader shows them a picture of Shinji taken close to the villa, and he can't believe that someone who looks as scruffy as Shinji killed Kaido. The group tells the leader named Lord Shirai that Kaido was nowhere near his level since he's Iron Vein level 4, and he's well known in the Dawnlight Church. The group believes that the military and the rest of the cultivators are blind fools for thinking some new guy is the strongest cultivator when they've not met Shirai. Meanwhile, Shinji steps out to get something to eat, but he's suddenly ambushed by the others from the group who try to jump on him. He doesn't move out of the way but activates his lightning energy, electrocuting them midair. When they fall to the ground, Shinji tells the person he senses hiding nearby to come out. Shirai steps out and realizes that Shinji really was the one who killed Kaido and introduces himself as Shirai Ryuto of the Dawnlight Church, a specialist in eliminating the church's enemies. Shirai tells him that today's the day he dies, and he fires ice to freeze Shinji solid. Shinji doesn't get out of the way, but simply melts the ice with his lightning attack. Shirai is shocked that this guy can block his attack, but Shinji just asks Shirai if this group is the Suicide Squad of the Dawnlight Church. Shirai tells him he'll have to pay for insulting the Dawnlight Church, so Shirai generates a huge phantom erosion wave to kill him because he knows even the strongest Iron Vein users can't handle it. He blasts Shinji with the wave, but Shinji doesn't move out of the way and says it's nothing special. Shirai is certain he'll get killed, but Shinji blasts the wave away with his light energy. This shocks Shirai, who asks what kind of spiritual energy this is, but Shinji only tells him it's the spiritual energy that's going to kill him. Shirai immediately turns to run when he realizes Shinji's not an ordinary cultivator and there's no way he can beat him. However, Shinji doesn't plan to let him escape. Shinji creates a flame beast, and Shirai turns around when he senses the strange aura in the air. He's shocked to see it, but Shinji uses the creature's hand to slam him into the ground. The hit injures Shirai greatly, and he wonders what kind of power this is. While he's on the ground, Shinji approaches him and tells him to answer his questions. Shirai tries to curse, so Shinji stomps his face and asks him what the Dawnlight Church is and who founded it. With his face now swollen, Shirai replies that the Dawnlight Church was created by divine will. Apparently not long ago, a savior appeared in response to the prayers of the people in Seihoku City. At that time, Seihoku City was under attack by a very dangerous mutant monster, which wiped out both the military and the Cultivators Association. Everyone had accepted their death, but a savior wielding a blood-stained staff and wearing a golden mask descended from the heavens. This person called himself the priest of the Dawnlight Church, and he single-handedly killed the mutant. From that day, the citizens of Seihoku City became followers of the Dawnlight Church. Shirai tells Shinji that they're God's apostles, and Shinji is just a mere mortal with no right to question their teachings. However, Shinji tells him he's been fooled by such fairy tales. Later, Shinji mentions that he's seen the records of the Dawnlight Church, so he accuses them of robbing and killing the people in Seihoku City. He calls them nothing but a cult spreading lies to fool people and gain power, and he says they call themselves so-called messengers of God when they're just abusing others with borrowed supernatural powers. Shirai insists that it's a necessary sacrifice because many people will descend into chaos if they don't sacrifice some. Shinji agrees that sacrifice is inevitable, so he brings down lightning on Shirai so that he's the next person that will be sacrificed. Sometime later, the priest learns that Shinji killed Shirai along with the three who went with him. This annoys the priest, and he tells himself that he won't let a stray dog of a cultivator destroy the faith he's built and take Seihoku City from him. The priest tells the people this is what he saw in the prophecy, and the people are shocked to hear that the holy priest saw a prophecy. The priest informs them he saw a prophecy about a heretic with the power of thunder and flame who will appear, but this marks the beginning of the end. Apparently, that man will bring calamity and chaos, so they have to cut him off for the peace of Seihoku City and the glory of the church. When they hear that, the people vigorously chant that Shinji be driven out to protect the Dawnlight Church. Shortly after, the prophecy is aired on television, and the priest announces that he's seen an impending disaster about how Shinji, who's a great sinner, will destroy human order. He says that Shinji's spiritual energy will devour the foundations of life and order, so he has to come to Seihoku City to face the judgment of the Dawnlight Church. The commander soon turns off the TV where it's been watched, and he talks about how it's spread across the internet despite their attempt to control its spread. Across the table, Natsuki wonders why people are dumb enough to believe this rage bait that the priest released, but Yue explains that people are just scared of an unknown disaster, and they don't really believe the prophecy. Eventually, the commander asks Shinji to stay home quietly for the next few days, and he offers to send an elite unit to protect him around the clock. He reminds Shinji that he's a critical asset and he needs to be protected now. But Shinji explains that he doesn't need protection, especially since he was about to head out. When he stands up to leave, the chairman asks him if he's crazy and reminds him that the Dawnlight Church could kill him. Shinji tells the commander that Yue just got dual attributes, but she's struggling to get some combat experience, so this is the perfect time. This shocks Natsuki and the commander, but Shinji explains that he hopes the priest can send a high-level monster their way because he's going to destroy the Dawnlight Church if that's not the case. Sometime later, Natsuki complains that people have way too much free time now that the spirit energy is back. Shinji wonders why she's so worked up, so she shows him online reports of people just rage-baiting each other every day. Shinji looks at the forums where some people believe Shinji is a threat that should be taken out, while others believe that the Dawnlight Church is just a bunch of bozos who don't have respect for Lord Shinji. Natsuki considers smashing the radio station where they're discussing that, but Shinji tells her not to get mad and says people will get quiet if they prove themselves. Eventually, Natsuki asks Shinji and Yue to be careful because they still don't know how strong the priest is. Natsuki mentions that she's heard that the priest's prophetic power is the real deal because the priest used his prophecies to uncover buried cultivators and led the Dawnlight Church to prosperity. Meanwhile, in the church headquarters, someone comes to notify the priest that Shinji has boarded a flight to Seihoku City. The priest considers that Shinji has walked right into his trap, so he informs his followers of an omen he saw about how calamity and ruin will occur if Shinji sets foot in Seihoku City. This shocks the men, but the priest tells them not to be afraid because God has already shown them a way to protect the land. He asks them to rise in the name of God and make Shinji understand he cannot set foot on their soil. Shortly after, several people show up at the Seihoku airport to tell Shinji to piss off to where he came from. They try to tell Shinji that he's not welcome here, and some of the Dawnlight members rally the people not to let darkness enter the city. Shinji walks into the airport, and he wonders if the people are really this brainwashed, and he realizes the priest is really skilled at manipulating people with faith. Yue asks him what they'll do since they can't attack civilians, but Shinji asks her, who says they can't attack them? He explains that they chose to believe in a suspicious god, so he says they need to show them if that god can actually save them. When he steps out to meet the people, they rush to tell him to get out of Seihoku, but Shinji creates a lightning barrier around himself that electrocutes those trying to apprehend him. When the members of the Dawnlight Church see the extent of Shinji's spiritual power, they try to escape, but Shinji spots them because of their clothes. He asks them to show him if their god can deliver them from a demon like him if they truly believe in him. The followers try to make a run for it, but Shinji violently electrocutes them, much to the surprise of the onlookers. He asks the people if they still believe in that god, so they start to make flippant excuses to leave when they realize this is not worth getting killed over. Everyone runs away, which surprises Yue, but Shinji tells her the people aren't really the church's believers, but they're just making a fuss without thinking. Yue asks him what they should do, and suggests they make the priest step down from his position. Meanwhile, the followers of the church bring a 17-year-old girl who has exceptional spirit potential to the priest so he can confirm. When they show him the girl, the priest mentions that her spirit energy isn't bad and her appearance is something else. Since he can't turn down a thick baddie, he tells them that God has sent her to him, and he can't defy God's will. He tells the girl to dedicate her whole life to God, but the building they're in is suddenly broken through. Shinji makes an entrance and tells the priest that he toys with people's hearts and oppresses the innocent. So Shinji says a church like this should disappear from Seihoku City. The priest tells Shinji he has some nerve to barge into their temple, but Shinji jokes that this place is more like a terrorist hideout. However, the priest says he came here to die and that he won't go easy on him. The priest sends his followers at Shinji, and Yue prepares to attack them, but Shinji asks her to wait. He tells her he brought her here for training, but he'll take care of these scumbags. With one slash of his sword, he uses a supreme thunderclap sword method that knocks back all the men instantly. This shocks the priest, and he doesn't believe his eyes, so Shinji tells him he won't touch him because Yue will be his opponent. Yue immediately launches at the priest to attack, but the guy creates a shield to protect himself. The priest realizes that Yue has reached peak spirit spring level 2 and wonders how she was able to do that while living outside the sanctuary. Shinji teases him, asking if he's surprised someone else can pull off what he can do. Yue attacks again with ice attacks, but the priest shields himself and retaliates with his own attack. Yue protects herself with an offensive ice cross slash, and both of their powers collide in the middle. The collision causes a great energy release, and the priest believes Yue could only have gotten this strong because of Shinji. He wonders if this woman got guidance from Shinji just like he did. While he's contemplating, Yue comes from behind him to slash his neck, but the priest quickly moves out of the way when Shinji tells him to watch his neck. He quickly tries to attack her, but he notices his dark energy is neutralized by the light energy in her ice attack. The priest is shocked, but Yue follows up with an ice shadow attack that hits the priest right in the face and destroys his mask. He demands to know what kind of spiritual energy this is that allows her to freeze his spiritual energy, but Yue just attacks him with some ice swords. The priest runs back to get out of the line of attack, but the swords are too many, and he stumbles on his back. This excites Shinji, so he commends her for reaching a point where she can take on a peak spirit spring level. Yue tells the priest this is the end for him, so she fires an ice arrow filled with light energy. The priest prays for Dawnlight to save him. Before the ice reaches him, an explosion occurs around the priest, pushing Yue backward as she wonders what just happened. Suddenly, a huge monster appears in front of the priest, and the priest worships the monster as the god of Dawnlight. Shinji realizes the real mastermind behind the Dawnlight Church has shown up, and Dawnlight asks the priest why he summoned him. The priest explains that intruders broke into his sanctuary and have slaughtered his believers, but Dawnlight calls the priest worthless trash for disturbing his rest. Because of that, Dawnlight blasts him with dark fire that puts him in torment. Eventually, Dawnlight turns to them and decides to face them. As Dawnlight is about to attack Shinji for disturbing his sleep, Yue blasts him with some ice and tells him she's his opponent. The ice enters into his body, but it's suddenly consumed, which shocks Yue. Dawnlight tells her that her spiritual energy tastes delicious, then blasts some dark energy from his mouth to consume her entirely. Yue quickly shields herself from the attack and blasts the monster with another ice attack, but it simply breaks the ice with its mouth. Yue is shocked by this, but Shinji blasts Dawnlight with a thunder flame attack that makes him scream, and Shinji tells Yue she did great. He says he'll take it from here, so he rushes toward the monster with a blazing thunderburst slash. Dawnlight quickly blasts him with a dark vortex, but Shinji destroys it with his flame, releasing explosive energy that destroys the building further and knocks Yue backward. She manages to get her footing and wonders if she'll ever be able to attain this level of power that an iron vein possesses. Meanwhile, Shinji creates a light attack in his hand and mixes it with a blazing thunder annihilation slash. He blasts Dawnlight with it, and the creature starts screaming in horror, pleading for Shinji to stop. When Dawnlight is taken down, Shinji tells Yue it's time to leave. However, Dawnlight speaks from the puddle of his destroyed body, praising the sweet smell of Shinji's spiritual energy. Dawnlight recreates his body again, this time planning to eat Shinji so he can take his power for himself. Shinji tells him to try it and rushes toward the monster to see how powerful he is. Shinji tries to attack from the side, but Dawnlight blocks him with his hand, so Shinji lands a cut on it. Suddenly, the monster starts to heal itself, which surprises Shinji. Again, Dawnlight tells him his spiritual energy is delicious, and that this town will be his territory once he eats him. Shinji wonders what Dawnlight means by territory, realizing the monster never left the church, no matter how hard he attacked it. He concludes the secret to its healing must be under the church, so he slashes the ground to break the flooring. When he does, he unearths the bodies of several cultivators trapped underground. Shinji confirms that the being is healing by feeding on their spiritual energy, but Dawnlight rushes at him to kill him before things get out of hand. However, Shinji tells Yue to freeze the altar, then disappears before Dawnlight can crush him. Dawnlight wonders where he went, but soon realizes Shinji has landed right on top of him. Dawnlight tries to release another dark vortex to blow him up, but Shinji jumps off. Meanwhile, Yue places a spiritual seal on the altar where the sacrifices are, causing the entire thing to freeze over. Dawnlight becomes terrified when his life source is frozen, so Shinji quickly slams him into the ground. With one swing of his sword, Shinji blasts him with flame energy that almost splits him in half. Dawnlight laments that he'll pay for destroying everything he has, but Shinji realizes they're in trouble because Dawnlight is going to self-destruct. Dawnlight initiates his self-destruct sequence, so Shinji tells Yue to hold on to him and he rushes out while carrying her. Dawnlight soon explodes violently and wrecks the whole place, but Shinji escapes with Yue escape to the top of another building. Eventually, Yue thanks Shinji for helping her, but he tells her not to let her guard down because it's not over. Around the frame of what remains of the sanctuary, a reddish dark energy comes out and develops into mindless monsters. The monsters storm into the city, so Yue moves forward to try to take care of them. However, Shinji stops her because it's impossible. He tells her there are too many civilians around, so they can't use wide-area spells so as not to hurt the people. She asks what they should do, so Shinji decides to make a call to the military. Meanwhile, in the military headquarters, they receive reports of a massive swarm of monsters heading towards Seihoku City. They start to deliberate whether to evacuate by force since civilian evacuation hasn't been completed, but they soon receive a call from Shinji, who notifies them that the Dawnlight Church has been destroyed. He also informs them that a mutated monster self-destructed and released all these little ones. He asks them to send every available combat unit there at once and tells them the Cultivation Association will create a barrier around the perimeter to block their entry. Immediately, the commander in charge of the city orders that every troop in Seihoku City be mobilized to get rid of the monsters and ensure there are 0 civilian casualties. In the city, the monsters chase after humans, and many of them pray for the priest of the Dawnlight Church and God to save them. The monsters pin down several of them, but Shinji comes to slay the monster and saves them. One of the girls who was pinned down claims that Shinji is God who has descended to save them in human form, but Shinji tells her there's no God or savior in this world, and he tells her to rely on herself if she wants to live. Suddenly, Shinji notices something weird, so Yue asks him what's wrong. He believes that the Dawnlight monster created all these monsters, and he believes there's no way it self-destructed and ended things. He believes that Dawnlight is probably hiding in the monster horde and is awaiting a chance to run away. Yue asks if they should attack the horde to find it, so Shinji agrees but tells her to leave the searching to him. Yue refuses to let him face the danger alone, but Shinji reminds her she has to help the people evacuate safely and report the situation to the military so they can move appropriately. When she tries to protest, he places a hand on her head and pleads with her because she's better at handling them than he is. She eventually agrees but asks him to come back alive, so he heads out. Shinji jumps amidst the monsters and they rush at him to grab a bite, but he grills them on the spot. Meanwhile, a woman carries an injured man on her lap, and she wonders why this has happened because she didn't ask him to protect her. The man tells her it's the right thing for him to protect his girlfriend. Then he gets up so she can have a chance to run while he distracts the enemy when they enter the conference room. He tells her to try to make it out of the building, but she tells him she's not leaving him. Suddenly, some rascals break into the room and one of them rejoices because he'll finally get his chance with the woman. The guy tells the woman he's been hoping to taste her for a while now, but the woman tells them to stay back because she's called the police and they'll be here soon. The men tell her the police don't have time to focus on them because they're busy dealing with the monsters outside that aren't affected by guns. The guy decides it's better to enjoy themselves since they're going to die, but the girl's boyfriend pushes him away from his girlfriend. After pinning him down, the guy tells his girlfriend Yuka to make a run for it, but she tries to run to help him when she sees him get punched in the gut. The three guys stomp her boyfriend Hayato into the ground, but the girl rushes in to slam a chair on the three bastards. When the leader of the rascals notices her coming close, he slaps her and knocks her to the ground. He soon grabs her by the hair and says it's more fun the harder she fights, but Yuka tells them they're all disgusting trash. Suddenly, the building implodes, knocking the men away. When Yuka sees Shinji, she recognizes him and wonders why he's here. When Shinji sees her, he recognizes her too as his aunt and asks her what she's doing here. After he helps her up, she explains that this is her company and reminds him he used to work part-time here. Shinji asks who the men on the ground are, and when he notices her bruises, he wonders why she's beaten up. He also wonders if he was the one who hurt these men by destroying the wall, but Yuka tells him to run because the men are dangerous. Shortly after, the men get up, but Yuka begs the men to leave Shinji alone because he's just a kid. When Shinji gets what's going on, he steps in front of Yuka and tells her he'll deal with these scumbags. The men ask Shinji if he thinks he's some sort of savior, so one of them rushes at him to smash his head with a stick. Yuka tries to tell Shinji to look out, but Shinji just stands there and blasts the guy away with flame energy. The blast knocks the guy backwards until his back cracks a wall and he starts to vomit blood. When the others realize they've bitten more than they can chew, they start to beg for forgiveness. But Shinji tells them it's too late now, and he asks them feel sorry in their afterlife. Suddenly, a monster enters into the room through the opening and rushes at Shinji. The men start to rejoice that Shinji's going to get taken out by the monster, so they call him an idiot. But Shinji grabs the monster by the neck and blows it into pieces. After that, he turns to the men and tells them they're next, so they start to beg for forgiveness again. In an instant, Shinji strikes them with Thunder Flame, killing them instantly. Immediately, he tells his aunt they need to get out now, but she asks him when he became Superman. He tells her he'll explain everything when things settle down in Seihoku City, so he grabs her and they head out. When they get outside, they find the place overrun by monsters, so Yuka suggests they stay back in the company until help comes. However, Shinji tells her he still has things to do, so he asks Yuka and her boyfriend to stay here and promises he'll return. He steps ahead to meet the monsters who rush towards him to grab a bite, but he uses a thunderclap explosive slash on them and cuts down almost 100 of them in an instant. Moments later, Yue and some soldiers arrive on the scene, so Yue rushes to his side to check if he's hurt. Shinji tells her he's fine, so he asks her if she can get his aunt and her boyfriend to a safe place. Yue tells him to leave it to her, but Yuka asks Shinji why he's not escaping with them. He tells her he can't leave because the monster's main body is still out there, and he has to finish it once and for all.